Tonight, you're going to uncover a powerful secret that Buddhist monks have been using for centuries to calm the restless mind and discover profound, meaningful rest. I'm about to share 10 remarkable Zen stories that have assisted millions of individuals in finally silencing their racing thoughts and gently drifting into the most serene sleep of their lives. Each narrative holds a hidden key that unlocks your mind's innate ability to release stress and worry. And here's what sets this apart from ordinary sleep meditation. These teachings are effective even if you've never meditated before. Even if your mind refuses to stop racing, even if you've exhausted all other options, the Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Over the next 3 hours, you'll discover precisely what this means and how to apply it to your own life. As we journey through tales of empty boats, wise monks, and unexpected wisdom, you'll begin to notice something amazing happening. Your tension will start to melt away. Your thoughts will begin to slow down, and you'll find yourself naturally sinking into a state of profound relaxation. So get comfortable. Adjust your pillow just the way you like it. Allow your body to become heavy against the bed. Take a deep breath with me now. And as you exhale, recognize that you've just taken the first step on a journey that's been waiting for you since the beginning of time. Let's start with our first story. Our first story unfolds by a peaceful river where a lesson about the nature of our reactions awaits us. This is the story of the empty boat. Once upon a time, there was a man who loved to row his boat on a peaceful river. He found immense joy in drifting along the water, savoring the calm and solitude of nature. Every evening, as the sun was setting and the world was bathed in golden light, he would take his boat out for a quiet journey. On one such evening, as he paddled softly and relished the tranquility, he noticed another boat heading directly toward him. At first, he called out politely, "Be careful," but the boat didn't change course. Still, the boat continued on its collision course. Now, growing angry, the man began shouting, "Move aside, you're going to crash into me." His peaceful evening was suddenly filled with frustration as he watched the approaching boat with mounting anxiety. Finally, as the two boats collided, he was ready to unleash his anger on the careless boater. But when he looked closely, he realized that the boat was empty. There was no one inside. It was simply drifting, carried by the current. In that moment, the man's anger dissolved instantly. He sat there feeling foolish for yelling at an empty boat. What had changed? Not the situation. The boats had still collided. What changed was his understanding. There was no intention behind the collision, no carelessness or disrespect to fuel his anger. The Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This profound truth reveals itself perfectly in the empty boat story. Our anger, frustration, and resentment often arise not from events themselves, but from the stories we create about the intentions behind those events. Why do we react this way? In Zen Buddhism, this reactivity stems from our ego clinging, our deep-seated attachment to a separate self that must be defended and validated. When someone cuts us off in traffic, our ego experiences it as a personal affront. How dare they disrespect me? The ego constructs a narrative where we are the center and others are either allies or adversaries. Consider how often throughout your day you encounter empty boat situations where you attribute harmful intent where none exists. The driver who cuts you off might be rushing to the hospital. The coworker who didn't acknowledge your greeting might be preoccupied with a family crisis. The friend who hasn't responded to your message might be struggling with depression. Yet, our ego mind quickly fills these empty vessels with assumptions of malice, carelessness, or disrespect. In Zen practice, we cultivate awareness of this pattern through mindfulness. By observing our thoughts without immediate identification, we can catch ourselves in the act of filling empty boats. We can notice the physical sensations of anger arising, the tightening chest, the quickening breath, the narrowing vision, and use these as bells of mindfulness, reminding us to pause and investigate. The 13th century Zen master Dogen taught that to study the Buddha way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. When we forget the self, when we let go of our ego's constant need to assert and defend, we see empty boats for what they truly are, simply events occurring in the vast river of existence without personal meaning or intentional slight. Buddha taught holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Each time we respond with anger, we suffer first and most. By recognizing the empty boats in our daily interactions, we liberate ourselves from this self-inflicted suffering. Tonight, as you reflect on your day, recall a moment when you felt slighted or offended. Can you recognize the empty boat in that situation? Can you see how your own mind filled that empty vessel with assumptions and judgments? And in that recognition, can you feel the freedom that comes from letting go? As the Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. The tranquility we seek is already available to us when we stop filling empty boats with the stories created by our ego mind. Now let us journey to a mountain path where a monk faces an unexpected challenge in The Monk and the Tiger. Once upon a time, in a quiet mountain monastery nestled deep in the forest, there lived a wise and peaceful monk. Every day he would take long walks through the surrounding woods, meditating on the beauty of nature and the teachings of the Buddha. He found great peace in the solitude of the forest, where he could connect deeply with the present moment and the world around him. One day, during his walk along a narrow mountain path, the monk suddenly heard a loud, frightening sound. A tiger's roar echoed through the trees. He froze for a moment, his heart pounding, and when he turned, he saw a large, fierce tiger charging toward him through the thick forest underbrush. The tiger's eyes were locked on him, and its powerful body moved with terrifying speed. The monk's first instinct was to run, and he did. He sprinted down the path, his robes billowing behind him as the tiger drew closer and closer. Desperate to escape, he saw a vine hanging down the side of a cliff. Without hesitation, he grabbed the vine and began to climb down, hoping to find safety below. As he descended the cliff, clinging tightly to the vine, he looked down and his heart sank. Below him, another tiger was pacing at the bottom of the cliff, waiting for him to fall. He was trapped. There was no way up and no way down. The monk paused, dangling from the vine, with one tiger above and another below. His situation seemed hopeless. But as he hung there, suspended between the two tigers, something caught his eye. Growing out of the cliffside just within reach was a small, wild strawberry plant. On the plant was a single ripe red strawberry. In that moment, the monk stopped thinking about the tigers, his fear, and his predicament. Instead, he reached out with one hand, carefully plucked the strawberry, and put it into his mouth. He bit into the fruit, savoring its sweetness. The taste was exquisite. For that brief moment, all that existed was the joy of the strawberry's flavor, sweet, fresh, and perfect. Despite the danger surrounding him, the monk found peace in that single mindful moment. He had accepted that he couldn't change his circumstances, but he could still fully experience the present. The monk smiled, knowing that this fleeting taste of sweetness was a reminder of life's beauty, even in the most precarious of situations. The Buddha taught, do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. This teaching lies at the heart of the monk and tiger story. It reveals a profound truth about our human condition. We spend our lives suspended between two tigers, the regrets and wounds of our past and the fears and anxieties about our future. Why do we struggle so mightily with staying present? Zen Buddhism explains that our minds evolved primarily as survival mechanisms, constantly scanning for threats and planning for protection. This evolutionary advantage becomes a spiritual liability when it pulls us away from the only moment we ever truly have this one. Our thinking mind convinces us that happiness lies in resolving past hurts or securing future comforts, when in reality, peace is available only in the present. Look deeply at your own experience. How much of your mental suffering comes from replaying past events you cannot change? The harsh words you wish you hadn't spoken, the opportunity you missed, the relationship that ended painfully. These are the tigers above, and how much anxiety stems from anticipating future scenarios that may never materialize. The work presentation next week, the medical test results, the financial worries. These are the tigers below. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. This is the strawberry in the story. The simple available joy that exists alongside our difficulties. It doesn't deny the reality of our challenges. It simply offers us a different relationship to them. This strawberry might be the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of a child's laughter, the taste of a simple meal, the comfort of your bed, or even the miracle of your own breath. These small pleasures are always available even in our most difficult moments, but we miss them when we're consumed by the tigers of past and future. Zen practice teaches us to cultivate what the Japanese call times ichigo ichi, times one time, one meeting. The recognition that each moment is a unique and unrepeatable gift. When we truly understand the preciousness of this moment, we naturally want to be fully present for it, regardless of our circumstances. The Buddha said, the secret of health for both mind and body is not to mourn for the past, worry about the future, or anticipate troubles, but to live in the present moment wisely and earnestly. This wisdom invites us to notice where our attention habitually goes. Are you constantly rehearsing past conversations or rehearsing future scenarios? Can you gently guide your awareness back to the strawberry of the present moment, the simple sensory experiences available right now? Tonight, as thoughts of tomorrow's responsibilities or yesterday's regrets arise, remember the monk and the strawberry. What small joy might you savor right now, even amid uncertainty? Perhaps it's the rhythm of your breathing, the weight of the blanket on your body, or the quiet of this moment. The Buddha taught there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. By savoring the strawberries along our journey, we discover that peace is not waiting for us when the tigers disappear. It's available in their very presence. Our next story reveals a profound truth about the nature of suffering through a simple yet powerful metaphor. This is the story of the two arrows. One day, the Buddha was sitting with his disciples in a peaceful forest clearing. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of birds filled the air. The Buddha often taught his disciples about the nature of suffering and the path to enlightenment. And on this particular day, a troubled disciple approached him with a question. "Master," the disciple said, bowing before the Buddha, "I do not understand why we suffer so much in this life. Pain seems to follow us wherever we go. Why is this so? And how can we find peace amidst so much suffering?" The Buddha gazed at the disciple with kindness and understanding. He saw the confusion and frustration in his student's eyes and knew that this was a question many of his followers pondered. "Let me explain," the Buddha said gently. Imagine that a person is struck by an arrow. This arrow causes pain, and the pain is inevitable. This is the first arrow, The disciples nodded, understanding that the first arrow symbolized the inevitable difficulties of life, the physical pain of illness, injury, or loss. But now the Buddha continued, imagine that after being struck by the first arrow, the person is then struck by a second arrow. This second arrow does not come from outside. It is created by the mind. It is the anger, fear, frustration, or sorrow that follows the pain. This is the second arrow. The Buddha paused, letting his words sink in. You see, he said, while the first arrow is unavoidable, the second arrow is optional. The first arrow represents the natural pain we all experience in life, the challenges and hardships we cannot escape. But the second arrow, the suffering caused by how we react to that pain, is something we can choose to avoid. The disciple listened intently as the Buddha explained that when we experience physical or emotional pain, the first arrow, we often make it worse by adding a second layer of suffering with our mental reactions. We become angry, resentful, or anxious, and these emotions deepen the wound. Instead of accepting the pain, we resist it, and in doing so, we increase our suffering. When we are struck by the first arrow, the Buddha continued, we must recognize it for what it is, a natural part of life. But we must also recognize the second arrow. It is the arrow we create ourselves. Through mindfulness and understanding, we can choose not to let the second arrow pierce us. Master, the disciple asked, beginning to understand, how can we avoid the second arrow? How can we prevent our minds from adding to our suffering? The Buddha smiled. By practicing mindfulness, we can observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming attached to them. When we feel pain, we can acknowledge it without judgment. We can accept that pain is part of life, but we do not need to dwell on it or create more suffering through resistance or negative thoughts. In this way, we can stop the second arrow before it strikes. The Buddha taught pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. This simple yet profound statement captures the essence of the two arrows parable. We cannot avoid all pain in life. The first arrows will find us, but we have tremendous power over how much we suffer because of that pain. Why do we so readily shoot second arrows at ourselves? Zen Buddhism points to several aspects of our conditioned mind that create this pattern. First is our deeply ingrained habit of aversion, the mind's automatic recoiling from unpleasant experiences. When pain arises, we instinctively resist it, creating a layer of mental tension that compounds the original discomfort. Second is our tendency toward identification, the way we merge with our experiences, thinking times, I am in pain times, rather than times there is pain being experienced asterisk. This subtle difference has profound implications. When we fully identify with pain, it becomes all-consuming, defining our entire reality. When we observe it with some space, it becomes just one aspect of a larger experience. Third is our habit of proliferation, the mind's tendency to generate endless thoughts about our experiences. A simple headache becomes a cascade of worries. Asterisk. What if this is serious? What if it gets worse? Why does this always happen to me? I won't be able to focus at work tomorrow. Asterisk. Each thought is another second arrow piercing us again and again. These mental habits operate largely unconsciously, which is why the Buddha emphasized mindfulness as the remedy. Through mindfulness practice, we develop the capacity to see these patterns as they arise. We learn to recognize the difference between the unavoidable first arrow of pain and the optional second arrows of our mental reactions. The Buddha said, "What you think you become, what you feel you attract, what you imagine you create." This teaching reveals the creative power of our thoughts. Each time we respond to pain with aversion, identification, and proliferation, we create suffering. Each time we meet pain with mindful awareness and acceptance, we create opportunity for healing and growth. Consider a personal disappointment, perhaps a rejection, a failure, or a loss. The first arrow is the actual event and the natural emotional response it evokes. The second arrows might include thoughts like times this always happens to me, times globalizing, times I'll never succeed, times catastrophizing, times I should have done better, times self-criticism, or times this isn't fair, times resistance to reality. Each of these thoughts creates additional suffering beyond the original disappointment. Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck said pain is not something to be avoided. It's something to be experienced without resistance. This is the heart of working skillfully with the first arrow. We don't deny pain or pretend it doesn't hurt. Instead, we bring curious, compassionate attention to the experience itself without adding the second arrows of judgment, resistance, or elaborate storytelling. The Buddha taught, if you are facing in the right direction, all you need to do is keep walking. The right direction is toward our pain, not away from it. By turning toward difficult experiences with mindfulness, we develop the capacity to be with them skillfully without compounding them with second arrows. Tonight, as you notice sensations in your body or emotions arising in your mind, can you discern the difference between the first and second arrows? Can you meet the inevitable pains of life, physical discomfort, emotional tenderness, or mental restlessness with kind awareness rather than resistance? As the Buddha said, the way is not in the sky, the way is in the heart. The path to freedom from suffering isn't found in escaping our human experience, but in meeting it with wisdom and compassion. Now, let us explore a story that teaches us about the universal nature of loss and how understanding it can bring peace. This is the parable of the mustard seed. Once long ago, there lived a young woman named Kisa Gotami. She was kind, compassionate, and devoted to her family. But her life took a tragic turn when her only child, a beloved son, fell ill and passed away. Overcome with grief, Kisa could not accept her son's death. She carried his lifeless body in her arms, wandering from house to house, desperately seeking someone who could bring him back to life. At each door, Kisa begged, "Please help me. My son is dead. Is there anyone who can cure him?" But everyone she approached turned her away, saying that there was nothing they could do. Her sorrow grew heavier with each step, and her heart ached more with every rejection. One day, Kisa's path led her to a wise elder, who took pity on her and said, "Go to the Buddha. Perhaps he can help you." With a flicker of hope in her heart, Kisa Gotami hurried to the Buddha, who was known for his compassion and wisdom. She found him sitting calmly under a Bodhi tree, surrounded by his disciples. Falling to her knees, she placed her son's body before him and pleaded, "Master, please bring my child back to life. I cannot bear this pain." The Buddha looked at her with great compassion and understanding. He could see Kisa was deeply suffering, but he also knew that she needed to learn a profound truth about life and death. He thought for a moment and then spoke softly, "I can help you, Kisa, but first you must bring me something. Go into the village and bring me a mustard seed." Kisa's heart leapt with hope. "Yes, master, I will bring you a mustard seed," she said, her voice trembling with relief. But before she could leave, the Buddha added, "The mustard seed must come from a household that has never experienced death. If you can find such a household, bring the seed to me, and I will bring your child back to life." Kisa nodded eagerly and set off on her mission. She went to the first house in the village and knocked on the door. A kind woman answered, and Kisa explained her request. "Please, can you give me a mustard seed? But it must come from a home where no one has ever died." The woman looked at Kisa with sad eyes and said, "I am sorry, but my husband passed away last year." Kisa thanked her and moved on to the next house. Again, she made her request, but this time the response was, "I am sorry, but my mother passed away many years ago." House after house, Kisa Gotami knocked on doors, hoping to find one that had never known death. But at every house, she heard stories of loved ones lost: a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a child. As the day wore on, Kisa began to realize that death was not unique to her. It was a universal experience, one that touched every family. Finally, as the sun began to set, Kisa returned to the Buddha empty-handed but with a new understanding. She knelt before him, her heart no longer filled with desperate hope but with acceptance. "Master," she said, "I could not find a single house that has never known death. Every family has experienced the loss of someone dear to them. Now, I understand that death is a part of life and no one can escape it." The Buddha nodded gently and replied, "Kisa, you have learned an important truth. Death is inevitable, and suffering comes to all who are attached to the things of this world. But by accepting the impermanence of life, you can find peace. Your grief was not unique. It is shared by all beings. This is the nature of existence." With these words, Kisa Gotami realized that her suffering, though intense, was not hers alone to bear. She had been blinded by her personal grief, but now she saw that all people experience loss. This new understanding allowed her to release her son's body and bury him with dignity, finally finding a sense of peace in the face of life's inevitable changes. The Buddha taught everything that has a beginning has an ending. Make your peace with that, and all will be well. This profound teaching lies at the heart of Kisa Gotami's journey. Her story illuminates one of the most challenging yet liberating truths of existence. Nothing lasts forever, and our attempts to deny this reality only increase our suffering. Why do we resist the truth of impermanence so fiercely? Zen Buddhism points to our deep-seated craving for permanence as the root of suffering. We want the pleasant to remain pleasant, the beautiful to remain beautiful, and most of all, we want those we love to remain with us always. This craving for permanence in an impermanent world creates a fundamental tension that manifests as suffering. Like Kisa, we often respond to loss with denial. We refuse to accept what has happened and expend enormous energy trying to reverse the irreversible. This denial is a natural part of grief, but when we become stuck in it, we prevent ourselves from moving through the healing process. The Buddha didn't immediately lecture Kisa on impermanence. Instead, he gave her an experience that allowed her to discover this truth for herself, a much more powerful teaching. The Buddha said the root of suffering is attachment. In Kisa's deep connection with her son wasn't just affection. It was an intense need that couldn't accept his death. Her quest for a mustard seed from a home untouched by death revealed that holding on to things that last forever is pointless. Every home, no matter how rich, joyful, or fortunate, experiences loss. This shared experience of loss unites us all in what Buddhists call the fellowship of suffering. When we truly grasp that loss affects everyone, our own sorrow, while still painful, feels less lonely. We see our experience as part of the vast flow of human life, not a unique tragedy that sets us apart. The Zen master Basui, in the 14th century, wrote, "To see the truth, leave desire behind. If you do not give up desire, you will not see the truth." Kisa's wish to bring her son back kept her from seeing the truth that everything changes. Only when she let go of this impossible wish could she begin to accept reality and find peace. Interestingly, the Buddha didn't try to comfort Kisa with promises of an afterlife or seeing her son again in another world. Instead, he helped her accept the natural order of things: what is born will die, and what comes together will eventually separate. This acceptance isn't giving up or being defeated. It's aligning with reality where healing can begin. The Buddha taught, "The trouble is you think you have time." This strong reminder of how short life is encourages us to value each moment and relationship, knowing that nothing lasts forever. Instead of making us sad or gloomy, this awareness can fill our lives with more appreciation and presence. Looking back on your own experiences with loss, whether it's a person, relationship, career, or even a stage of life, can you understand the lesson of the mustard seed? Can you see how your suffering might be made worse by resisting the natural flow of change, the Buddha said. When you realize how perfect everything is, you will tilt your head back and laugh at the sky. This perfect imperfection includes the cycles of life and death, growth and decay coming together and separating the very rhythm of existence. Tonight, as you think about the losses you've experienced and those you fear, remember Kisa Gotami's journey. Can you find comfort in knowing that everyone experiences change? Can you see how accepting this truth might make your suffering easier to bear? Not by lessening your loss, but by seeing it as part of the wide shared experience of being human. As the Buddha taught, in the end, only 3 things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. Our next story explores the wisdom of not judging and staying calm when life constantly changes. It's the story of the farmer and the horse. Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village, there lived a humble farmer. His neighbors knew him for his hard work and calm attitude. His farm was small, and he only had one horse to help with all his daily tasks, from plowing the fields to carrying heavy loads. Even though he didn't have much, the farmer was happy with his life. One day, his horse ran away. The farmer woke up to find the stable empty and the horse gone. His neighbors, hearing the news, hurried to his house to offer their sympathy. "What terrible luck," they said. "How will you manage without your horse? This is such a misfortune." The farmer, however, stayed calm. He looked at his neighbors and simply said, "Maybe." The neighbors were confused by his answer. How could he be so unconcerned about such bad luck? They shook their heads and went home, convinced that the farmer was in denial about his loss. A few days later, to everyone's surprise, the horse came back. But it didn't come back alone. It brought a group of wild horses from the mountains with it. Now the farmer had several horses, not just one. The neighbors heard the news and rushed back to the farmer's house. This time, they were full of excitement. "How wonderful," they exclaimed. "Now you have so many horses, what incredible fortune." The farmer looked at his neighbors again, smiled calmly, and said, "Maybe." Once again, the neighbors were confused. Surely this was a stroke of good luck, but the farmer seemed just as unconcerned as before. They wondered why he didn't seem more excited about his new wealth. A few days later, the farmer's son decided to try taming one of the wild horses. While riding it, he was thrown off and broke his leg badly. The injury was serious, and the son wouldn't be able to help with the farm work for a long time. Hearing about the accident, the neighbors returned to the farmer's house again. This time, they were filled with sympathy. "What bad luck," they said. "Your son has broken his leg and now he can't help you. This is truly unfortunate." As before, the farmer responded with his usual calmness. "Maybe," he said. The neighbors were now completely puzzled by the farmer. Every time something significant happened, whether it seemed good or bad, he gave the same nonchalant response. They couldn't understand why he wouldn't react more strongly to the events in his life. A few weeks later, the country was thrown into turmoil. A war broke out, and soldiers came to the village to draft all the young men into the army. Many of the village's sons were taken away to fight in the war. But because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he wasn't drafted and stayed home with his father. Once again, the neighbors visited the farmer. "How fortunate you are," they said. "Because of your son's injury, he was spared from the war. What amazing luck." And once again, the farmer replied, "Maybe." The Buddha taught nothing is permanent, everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming. This truth is the basis of the farmer's wisdom. His consistent response of maybe shows a deep understanding that life is always changing, and what seems good or bad at one moment might be very different later. Why do we quickly judge events as good or bad? Zen Buddhism points to our mind's habit of categorizing things, constantly sorting experiences into desirable or undesirable, fortunate or unfortunate. This way of thinking creates an emotional roller coaster. We're thrilled when things go well and crushed when they go poorly. But as the farmer's story shows, we never have the full picture. We can't know how today's misfortune might prevent tomorrow's disaster, or how today's blessing might lead to tomorrow's challenge. The idea of not judging in Zen Buddhism doesn't mean being unconcerned or apathetic. The farmer wasn't emotionally detached from his life. Instead, he had what the Buddha called equanimity, a balanced view that stayed steady through life's ups and downs. He cared about his horse, his son, and his livelihood, but he didn't let his peace of mind depend on changing events. The Zen master Sangtan wrote in the Hin Shinming, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." When we stop demanding that life fit our ideas of how things should be, we find a deeper kind of freedom. We open ourselves to life's inherent wisdom, which often unfolds in ways we can't predict. The Buddha taught, "Do not overrate what you have received, nor envy others. He who envies others does not obtain peace of mind." How often do we compare our situations to others, deciding that we're either lucky or unlucky based on these comparisons? The farmer's neighbors were always judging his situation based on their own ideas of good and bad, while the farmer himself remained free from these limited views. Our modern lives are full of chances to practice this maybe mindset. The promotion you didn't get that leads to a more satisfying job. The relationship that ended painfully but made room for personal growth. The illness that made you rethink your priorities. The financial setback that taught you resilience. Looking back, many of us can see seeming misfortunes that ultimately led to growth or unexpected blessings. The poet Rumi, in the 13th century, captured this wisdom when he wrote, "What appears to be a curse may be a blessing, and what appears to be a blessing may be a curse." The farmer lived this understanding not just as an idea, but as a reality. His maybe wasn't passive resignation, but active wisdom, recognizing that life's full story is still unfolding. The Buddha said, "In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west." People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. Similarly, the ideas of good luck and bad luck are our own mental creations. Reality itself is simply a flow of causes and conditions, neither good nor bad in themselves. Tonight, as you think about recent events in your life that you've labeled as good or bad luck, try holding them with the farmer's gentle maybe. Notice how this view might ease anxiety about negative situations and lessen attachment to positive ones. Can you find freedom in not judging how things should be? As the Buddha taught, with our thoughts we make the world. The farmer's maybe reminds us that we always have a choice in how we see our experiences, and this choice greatly affects our peace of mind. Our next story reveals the power of not reacting and controlling our emotions. It's the story of the Buddha and the angry man. Once upon a time, while the Buddha was teaching a group of disciples in a peaceful forest, a man approached him, his eyes burning with anger. The man had heard about the Buddha's wisdom and teachings, but he felt threatened by the Buddha's influence over others. Filled with jealousy and resentment, he decided to confront the Buddha and insult him in front of his followers. As the Buddha sat calmly under the shade of a Bodhi tree, the man stormed up to him and began shouting insults. "You are nothing but a fraud," the man yelled. Who do you think you are? You may pretend to be wise and enlightened, but you're just deceiving people." The Buddha remained completely calm and unbothered by the man's harsh words. His expression didn't change, and he didn't respond to the man's anger. Seeing the Buddha's lack of reaction only made the man angrier. He shouted even louder, "How can you just sit there acting like you're above everyone else? Do you think you're better than me? I refuse to respect someone like you." Despite the man's fury, the Buddha stayed silent and serene, simply watching him with compassion. Finally, after several minutes of shouting, the man grew exhausted. He had expected to provoke a response, but the Buddha's peaceful demeanor confused him. After catching his breath, the man demanded, "Why won't you say anything? Why won't you defend yourself? Don't you care what I think of you?" The Buddha looked at him with kindness and finally spoke, his voice soft and calm. "Tell me," the Buddha asked gently, "if someone offers you a gift and you decline to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man, puzzled by the question, thought for a moment before responding. "It would still belong to the person who offered it. If I don't take it, the gift remains theirs." The Buddha nodded. "Exactly. And in the same way, if you offer me your anger and I do not accept it, then who does the anger belong to?" The man was stunned by the Buddha's words. He realized that his anger hadn't affected the Buddha at all. Instead, it remained his own burden to carry. The Buddha continued, "If I refuse to accept your insults and your anger, they fall back on you. You are the one who suffers from them, not me. I choose not to be troubled by your words. Instead, I choose peace." The man stood in silence, thinking about what the Buddha had said. He realized that his anger had consumed him, but it had no power over the Buddha, who remained unaffected by it. In that moment, the man understood that holding on to his anger only harmed himself, not the Buddha. Feeling ashamed, the man bowed his head. "Master, I see now that my anger has only caused me pain. How can I learn to be at peace as you are?" The Buddha smiled warmly, his compassion shining through. "Anger is like a hot coal you pick up with the intention of throwing it at someone, but in the process you burn yourself. Let go of the coal. Let go of your anger. Instead, practice mindfulness, compassion, and understanding. Through these you will find peace." The man, humbled by the Buddha's wisdom, thanked him and bowed deeply. From that day forward, he sought to practice the Buddha's teachings, letting go of his anger and learning to find peace within himself. The Buddha taught, "You are not punished for your anger. You are punished by your anger." This profound insight shows why reactive emotions cause us so much suffering. When we carry anger, resentment, or hatred, we hurt ourselves far more than those we direct these emotions toward. Every moment spent in anger is a moment lost to peace. Every thought of revenge is energy taken away from healing. Why do we hold on so tightly to our anger? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that make anger especially hard to let go of. First is our sense of righteousness, the belief that our anger is justified and worth holding on to. We confuse letting go of anger with accepting the behavior that caused it. But the Buddha's teaching challenges this idea. We can set clear boundaries and seek justice without poisoning ourselves with reactive emotions. Second is our deep-seated identification with our emotions. We say, "I am angry," rather than "I am experiencing anger," making the emotion inseparable from our sense of self. When someone suggests we let go of anger, it can feel like they're asking us to let go of part of ourselves. Zen practice teaches us to create space between our awareness and our emotions, allowing us to observe them without being consumed by them. Third is our cultural conditioning around anger. Many of us are taught that anger is power, that it motivates action and commands respect. We fear that without anger, we might become passive or be taken advantage of. The Buddha's response to the angry man demonstrates true power, not the reactive force of aggression, but the stable, immovable strength of equanimity. The Buddha said hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is an ancient and eternal law. This teaching invites us to examine our assumption that anger is an effective response to mistreatment. Does meeting hostility with hostility ever truly resolve the underlying causes of conflict, or does it simply continue the cycle of reactivity? The metaphor of the gift is particularly revealing. It suggests that emotions like anger, criticism, and judgment require our acceptance to affect us. When someone directs negativity toward us, we have a choice. We can accept this energy, absorb it, and allow it to disturb our peace, or we can decline the offering, maintaining our equanimity. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally disconnected or indifferent to injustice. The Buddha didn't ignore the angry man. He remained present, engaged, and responsive, but he responded from a place of compassion rather than reactivity, wisdom rather than ego defense. This is the essence of non-reactivity in Zen practice, not withdrawal from engagement, but engagement from a different quality of awareness. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh teaches a practice called embracing anger with mindfulness, which involves recognizing anger when it arises, breathing with it, and treating it with the same care we would show a crying baby. Rather than suppressing anger or expressing it mindlessly, we acknowledge it with kind awareness, understanding its causes and impermanent nature. The Buddha taught, if you truly loved yourself, you would never harm another. This points to the interconnected nature of self-care and care for others. When we react with anger, we harm ourselves first and most directly. Choosing peace over reactivity isn't a selfless sacrifice, but the most profound form of self-care. Tonight, as you reflect on interactions that have triggered anger or resentment in you, experiment with the Buddha's gift metaphor. Can you recognize that you have a choice about whether to accept the gifts of others' negativity? Can you feel the freedom that comes from declining these offerings? Remember the Buddha's words, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. In releasing that coal, you free not only yourself, but create space for genuine resolution and understanding. Let us now explore a story about the wisdom of impermanence and non-attachment. It's the story of the monk and the teacup. In a quiet Zen monastery nestled in the mountains, a revered monk lived a life of deep contemplation and mindfulness. His students admired him for his wisdom, calm demeanor, and the way he embraced the present moment, never disturbed by the chaos around him. Every day the monk would sit in meditation, drink tea, and share lessons with his students. One afternoon during their usual tea ceremony, the monk held up a simple clay teacup and gazed at it for a long moment. The cup was beautiful in its simplicity, with a soft, earthy color and a perfectly rounded shape. The students, curious about their master's silent contemplation, waited eagerly to hear what he had to say. After a few moments, the monk smiled and said, "This teacup is already broken." The students looked at one another in confusion. They could see clearly that the teacup was whole, undamaged, and perfectly intact. One of the younger students couldn't contain his curiosity any longer and spoke up. "Master, the teacup is not broken. It is perfectly fine. Why do you say it is already broken?" The monk, still smiling, placed the teacup gently on the table in front of him. "In my mind," he said softly, "this teacup is already broken. It may seem whole now, but one day, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps years from now, it will break. This is inevitable. When I understand that it is already broken, I can fully appreciate it as it is without clinging to it. I can enjoy drinking tea from it, knowing that its life is temporary. The students were silent, absorbing the weight of the monk's words. They realized that the master wasn't speaking only about the teacup. He was offering them a deeper lesson about life itself. The monk continued, "Everything in life is like this teacup. All things, no matter how beautiful or precious, are impermanent. We cannot hold on to them forever. When we understand that we are free to enjoy life fully without fear of losing what we have, we can appreciate each moment, each relationship, each experience, knowing that it too will pass. And when it is gone, we will not suffer because we have already accepted its impermanence." One of the older students nodded thoughtfully and said, "Master, does this mean we should not love or care for things because they will one day be gone?" The monk shook his head gently. "No, it means the opposite. When we accept the impermanence of all things, we can love them more deeply because we are not holding on out of fear of loss. We love and appreciate them for what they are in this moment. We understand that they are part of the natural flow of life. In this way, we can live with a peaceful heart, unburdened by the attachment to things that are bound to change." The Buddha taught, "All conditioned things are impermanent." When one sees this with insight, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This profound truth lies at the heart of the teacup story and points to one of the most liberating yet challenging aspects of Zen practice: embracing impermanence not as a philosophical concept but as a lived reality. Why do we resist impermanence so fiercely? Zen Buddhism identifies our fundamental misunderstanding of reality as the root of this resistance. We perceive things as solid, separate, and lasting when in fact they are fluid, interconnected, and transient. This misperception leads to what Buddhists call attachment, or clinging, our desperate attempt to hold on to things that by their very nature cannot be held. Consider how this attachment manifests in your daily life. We become attached to possessions, fearing their loss or damage. We cling to relationships, trying to prevent them from changing. We hold on to our youth, health, and capabilities, resisting the natural process of aging. We even become attached to our ideas, opinions, and identities, defending them as if they were permanent fixtures rather than fluid constructs. The monk's declaration that the teacup is already broken offers a radically different way of relating to impermanence. Instead of denying or resisting change, he embraces it preemptively by acknowledging the inevitable end of all things. He liberates himself from the anxiety of trying to prevent the unpreventable. This isn't pessimism, but clear-eyed realism that paradoxically enhances his appreciation of the present moment. The Buddha said, "The world is afflicted by death and decay, but the wise do not grieve, having realized the nature of the world." This teaching isn't encouraging callousness or detachment from caring. Rather, it points to a different quality of caring, one not distorted by the impossible expectation of permanence. The monk doesn't love his teacup less because he knows it will break. He loves it more precisely because its existence is fleeting and precious. Zen master Shunryu Suzuki explained this paradox beautifully. When we understand the truth of impermanence and find our composure in it, we find ourselves in nirvana. This composure isn't achieved by resigning ourselves to loss, but by fully embracing the nature of reality. It's a composure that allows for deep engagement with life precisely because we're not constantly fighting against its fundamental characteristics. In practical terms, how might we cultivate this already broken perspective? We can start by noticing our attachments, the people, things, and circumstances we most fear losing. Rather than trying to suppress this fear, we can gently acknowledge the temporary nature of these precious aspects of our lives. We can practice saying to ourselves, "This too will pass," not as a dreary reminder, but as an invitation to cherish the present moment. The Buddha taught neither fire nor wind, birth nor death can erase our good deeds. This points to another aspect of the already broken wisdom. While all material things, including our bodies, are impermanent, the impact of our actions and the quality of our presence endures beyond physical forms. By focusing on cultivating wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness qualities that transcend impermanence, we find a different kind of security. Tonight, as you rest, consider what teacups in your life you might be clinging to with anxiety about their eventual breaking. Can you experiment with the monk's perspective, mentally acknowledging their impermanence not as a threat but as a reality that deepens their value? As the Buddha said, the trouble is you think you have time. The recognition of impermanence doesn't diminish life's beauty. It intensifies it, inviting us to appreciate fully what is here before it inevitably transforms. Now let us explore a story about true generosity and compassion. This is the Buddha and the robe. In ancient India, during the time when the Buddha traveled across villages and towns to spread his teachings, he often attracted a large following. Many were deeply moved by his wisdom and left their homes to become monks and disciples under his guidance. One day, while staying in a small village, a wealthy merchant heard about the Buddha's presence and decided to pay him a visit. He felt profoundly inspired by the Buddha's teachings and wanted to offer him a gift as a sign of his respect. The merchant brought a beautifully woven, luxurious robe crafted from the finest silk and richly adorned with intricate patterns. The merchant approached the Buddha, bowed respectfully, and presented the robe with reverence. "Lord Buddha," he said, "I wish to offer you this robe as a token of my gratitude for your teachings." The Buddha looked at the robe and then at the merchant, a gentle smile gracing his lips. He sensed the merchant's sincerity and his heartfelt desire to give. However, the Buddha lived a life of simplicity and held no interest in material wealth or luxuries. His needs were few, and he taught his followers to embrace a simple way of life as well. "Thank you for your kind gesture," the Buddha said, "but I cannot accept this robe. It is far too extravagant for a simple monk like myself. I am content with the robe I already wear." The merchant was taken aback by the Buddha's response. "But Lord Buddha," he replied, "I offer this robe out of respect for you. Surely you deserve the best that I can give." The Buddha, his smile unwavering, responded, "If you truly wish to honor me, there is another way you can use this gift. Take this robe and offer it to someone who is truly in need, someone who lacks even the basic clothing to cover themselves. That would bring greater merit and joy." The merchant, now understanding the depth of the Buddha's compassion for the poor, nodded slowly. He grasped that the true essence of giving wasn't about offering gifts to those who already had enough, but about providing for those in need. "Thank you, Lord Buddha. I will do as you say," the merchant responded. He took the robe and later found a poor man in the village shivering in the cold, clad only in rags. The merchant gave the robe to the poor man, who was overjoyed and deeply grateful. The next day, the merchant returned to the Buddha and shared what he had done. The Buddha nodded approvingly and said, "You have done well, my friend. True generosity lies not in giving to those who expect it or do not need it, but in helping those who are in real need. By sharing your wealth with those who are less fortunate, you have brought true joy and compassion into the world." The merchant bowed deeply, feeling a warmth in his heart he hadn't experienced before. He realized that the Buddha's wisdom extended far beyond the simple act of receiving a gift. It encompassed understanding the true nature of giving, the importance of compassion, and the joy that arises from helping others. The Buddha taught generosity brings happiness at every stage of its expression. We experience joy in forming the intention to be generous in the actual act of giving and in recollecting the fact that we have given. This profound insight reveals that true generosity is not merely about the transfer of material goods, but about the transformation of our hearts and minds through the act of giving. Why did the Buddha refuse the luxurious robe? Zen Buddhism suggests several layers of wisdom embedded in his response. First, he embodied the principle of knowing what is enough, understanding that unchecked desires can never truly be satisfied. By being content with his simple robe, the Buddha demonstrated freedom from the endless cycle of wanting more and better. Second, the Buddha recognized that true generosity is not about social status or recognition, but about genuine need. By redirecting the merchant's gift to someone truly suffering from the cold, he taught that compassionate action should be guided by wisdom rather than convention or status. Third, the Buddha's response revealed his understanding of the merchant's motivation. The merchant wanted to gain merit and express reverence, but the Buddha showed him a more profound way to accomplish both, by directly alleviating another's suffering, rather than adding luxury to the Buddha's already sufficient life. In our consumer-driven culture, we often equate giving with buying expensive gifts for people who already have plenty. We measure the value of our generosity by the price tag rather than by the impact it makes. The Buddha's teaching invites us to reconsider this approach, urging us to be more mindful about where our resources can do the most good. The Buddha said, "If you knew what I know about the power of giving, you would not let a single meal pass without sharing it in some way." This points to the transformative potential of generosity, not just for the recipient, but for the giver as well. Each act of genuine giving weakens our self-centeredness and strengthens our connection to others. It reminds us that our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of all beings. Zen practice encourages us to cultivate times dana paramita times the perfection of giving. This involves not just material generosity, but also giving our time, attention, energy, and presence. Sometimes the most precious gift we can offer is simply being fully present with another person, listening deeply without distraction or agenda. The story also highlights the importance of discernment in giving. The Buddha didn't suggest that the merchant keep the robe for himself or sell it for profit. He directed him to find someone in genuine need. This discernment requires us to look deeply at situations rather than following conventional patterns of giving that may not address real suffering. The Buddha taught the greatest gift is the act of giving itself. This points to the interior transformation that happens when we give from a place of compassion rather than obligation, social expectation, or ego gratification. When we give in this way, we experience what Buddhists call times mudita, times sympathetic joy in the happiness of others. Tonight, as you reflect on your own acts of giving, consider whether they align with the Buddha's teaching in this story. Are there ways you might redirect your resources, material, emotional, or attentional, toward those in genuine need? Can you notice the difference in feeling between giving that comes from social obligation and giving that flows from compassion? Remember the Buddha's words, "If beings knew as I know the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness overcome their minds." Now let us explore a lesser-known Zen story that reveals profound wisdom about controlling our thoughts. This is the story of the two monks and the river. Two monks, an elder and a younger disciple, were traveling together on a long journey. Their path led them through forests, over mountains, and across valleys. They walked in mindful silence for most of their journey, focusing on each step and each breath. As they approached a river, they saw a young woman standing at the edge. She was beautifully dressed in fine silks and appeared distressed. The river was swollen from recent rains, and she was afraid to cross it, fearing that the strong current would ruin her clothes and possibly put her in danger. Upon seeing the monks, she called out to them, "Please, kind sirs, could you help me cross this river? I must reach the other side, but I am afraid to wade through the water." Without hesitation, the elder monk walked over to the woman, gently lifted her in his arms, carried her across the river, and set her down safely on the other bank. The woman thanked him with a bow and continued on her way. The two monks resumed their journey in silence. As they walked, the younger monk appeared troubled. His brow was furrowed, and he kept glancing at his companion with a mixture of confusion and disapproval. After several hours of walking, the younger monk could no longer contain himself. "Master," he burst out, "as monks we have taken vows not to touch women. How could you carry that woman across the river?" The elder monk looked at his companion with a gentle smile and replied, "I left the woman at the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The younger monk was struck silent by these words. He realized that while his companion had only carried the woman for a few minutes out of compassion and practical necessity, he himself had been carrying her in his mind for hours, burdening himself with judgment and disturbing his peace. The Buddha taught, "What we think we become." This fundamental truth illuminates why the younger monk's mental burden was so much heavier than any physical weight the elder monk temporarily carried. While the elder monk responded to the immediate need with compassion and then returned to the present moment, the younger monk remained trapped in the past, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. Why do we, like the younger monk, so often carry unnecessary mental burdens? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that contribute to this habit. First is our attachment to rules and concepts rather than to principles. The younger monk was so fixated on the letter of the monastic rule that he missed its spirit, which is to live with purity and compassion. His rigid interpretation prevented him from seeing the elder monk's action as an expression of genuine Buddhist compassion. Second is our tendency toward judgment and mental proliferation. One thought leads to another, creating elaborate narratives and evaluations that pull us away from the present moment. The younger monk's initial observation led to hours of internal commentary, criticism, and confusion, all unnecessary and self-created suffering. Third is our difficulty in distinguishing between skillful concern and unskillful rumination. While reflection on past actions can be valuable for learning, obsessive dwelling serves no purpose except to disturb our peace. The elder monk demonstrated the ability to act decisively when needed, and then to let go completely. In our daily lives, we all carry similar invisible burdens. The argument from last week that we keep rehearsing in our minds, the mistake at work, that we can't stop replaying the worries about future scenarios that may never materialize. Each of these mental patterns is like carrying a person across a river and never putting them down. The Buddha said, "Let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present." Crossing to the farther shore of existence with mind released from everything, do not take up residence in birth and death. This teaching points to the freedom available when we release our mental fixations and return to the simplicity of the present moment. Zen practice offers concrete methods for putting down our mental burdens. Mindfulness meditation trains us to notice when we're carrying unnecessary thoughts and gently set them down. The practice of labeling thoughts as thinking helps us recognize them as mental constructs rather than reality. And focusing on physical sensations, the feeling of our feet touching the ground, the rhythm of our breath, anchors us in the present when thoughts try to drag us into the past or future. The elder monk embodies what Zen calls no mind, or times mushin asterisk. Not the absence of thought, but freedom from attachment to thought. He could think clearly when needed, act compassionately when required, and then return to the peaceful emptiness of the present moment. This state is available to all of us, when we learn to put down what no longer needs to be carried. Tonight, as thoughts arise about the day behind you or the day ahead, can you notice when you're unnecessarily carrying someone or something in your mind? Can you feel the freedom that comes from gently setting down these mental burdens? Remember the Buddha's words, "Nothing is worth clinging to." In that release lies true peace. Let us now turn to a story that teaches about the obstacles we create in our own minds. This is the story of the empty cup. A respected university professor once visited a Zen master seeking to understand Zen wisdom. The professor had spent many years studying philosophy and religious texts and had written several books on comparative spirituality. He considered himself quite knowledgeable, but was curious about Zen's unique perspective. When he arrived at the master's simple dwelling, the old Zen master greeted him warmly and invited him to sit. "I have come to inquire about Zen," the professor began. "I would like to know what teachings you have to offer and how they differ from the many philosophies I have already studied." The master smiled and said, "Let us have tea first. Then we can talk about Zen." The professor nodded, expecting that after the customary tea he would have the serious philosophical discussion he had traveled so far to engage in. The Zen master prepared the tea with deliberate, mindful movements. When it was ready, he placed a cup in front of the professor and began to pour. The cup filled to the brim, but the master continued pouring. Tea spilled over the rim across the table and onto the professor's clothes and the floor. The professor jumped up in alarm. "Stop. The cup is full. No more will go in." The Zen master stopped pouring and looked directly at the professor. "Like this cup," he said, "you are full of your own opinions, theories, and assumptions. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor was stunned into silence. In that moment, he realized that his extensive knowledge had become a barrier rather than a pathway to new understanding. His cup was so full that there was no room for anything new to enter. With this humbling insight, he bowed to the master, ready now to truly begin learning. The Buddha taught, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. This teaching points to the importance of maintaining an open, receptive mind, what Zen calls beginner's mind, or times Shoshin asterisk. When we approach life with the fresh perspective of a beginner, we remain open to infinite possibilities. When we believe we already know, we close ourselves off to new insights. Why do we so readily fill our cups to overflowing? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that contribute to this common human tendency. First is our ego's need for certainty and control. By convincing ourselves that we understand how things are, we create an illusion of security in an inherently uncertain world. Our opinions and beliefs become a fortress protecting us from the vulnerability of not knowing. Second is our attachment to identity. Much of who we think we are is constructed from our accumulated knowledge, experiences, and viewpoints. To empty our cup feels threatening because it challenges our sense of self. If I let go of what I know, who am I? This fear keeps us clinging to our filled cups even when they no longer serve us. Third is what Buddhists call the comparing mind, our habit of constantly measuring ourselves against others. In academic and professional contexts, especially, knowing more than others becomes a source of status and recognition. The professor's identity and reputation were built on being knowledgeable, making it particularly challenging for him to adopt a stance of not knowing. The consequences of a full cup extend beyond limiting our learning. When our minds are crammed with preconceptions, we experience life through filters that distort our perception. We see not what is actually before us, but what our existing knowledge tells us times should times be there. We miss the richness and complexity of reality by forcing it to conform to our limited understanding. Zen practice offers specific methods for emptying our cups. Meditation trains us to observe how quickly we label, categorize, and judge experiences based on past knowledge. By noticing these mental habits, we create space between our pure awareness and our conceptual overlays. We practice putting aside what we think we know in order to encounter reality directly. The Buddha said, "With our thoughts we make the world. When our thoughts are rigid and fixed, the world becomes small and predictable. When we empty our cups, approaching life with openness and humility, the world reveals its boundless wonder." In your daily life, notice when you approach situations with a cup already full. Perhaps it's a conversation where you're formulating your response before the other person has finished speaking, or a familiar activity you perform on autopilot, missing its unique qualities in this moment, or a person you think you understand completely, leaving no room for them to surprise you. Tonight, as you rest, experiment with emptying your cup. Let go of what you think you know about relaxation, sleep, or even these stories you're hearing. Can you listen with fresh ears, as if hearing these words for the first time? Can you feel the spaciousness that emerges when you set aside the need to evaluate, analyze, or categorize? As the Buddha taught, empty your boat of water. It will go lightly and swiftly. Similarly, when we empty our minds of preconceptions, we move through life with greater ease and joy. Now, let us explore a story about finding wisdom in unexpected places. This is the story of the Zen master and the dirty road. A Zen master was traveling with a group of disciples along a countryside road. The rainy season had turned the path into a muddy, difficult journey. As they walked, mindfully paying attention to each step, they came upon a beautiful temple on a hill overlooking the road. The group decided to visit the temple and climb the hill. When they arrived, they found a magnificent structure with intricate carvings, golden statues, and meticulously maintained gardens. Inside, priests in immaculate robes conducted elaborate ceremonies with precise movements and beautiful chanting. The disciples were impressed by the temple's splendor and the priest's dedication to their rituals. After spending some time observing, they gathered around their master outside the temple. "Master," one disciple asked, "what do you think of this temple and its practices? Is this the path to enlightenment?" The Zen master didn't answer immediately. Instead, he led his disciples back down to the muddy road they had been traveling on. He stopped at a particularly dirty section, knelt down, and placed his hand in the mud. Then he drew a circle in the muddy ground. Looking at his disciples, he said, "The truth can be found here as well." The disciples were confused at first, but slowly they began to understand. The master was showing them that enlightenment was not confined to beautiful temples or perfect rituals. The mud, ordinary, messy, and commonly avoided, contained the same ultimate reality as the golden temple. True wisdom could be found anywhere by those with eyes to see. The Buddha taught, if you cannot find the truth right where you are, where else do you expect to find it? This profound insight lies at the heart of the Zen master's mud circle. It challenges our tendency to seek enlightenment in special places, extraordinary experiences, or perfect conditions, anywhere but the immediate reality of our lives. Why do we struggle to recognize the wisdom available in ordinary moments? Zen Buddhism points to our habitual spiritual materialism, the tendency to turn spirituality into another form of acquisition and achievement. We believe enlightenment is found through accumulating special experiences, teachings, or credentials, rather than penetrating the reality of our everyday existence. The mud represents the aspects of life we typically try to avoid or transcend: the messy emotions, uncomfortable sensations, tedious tasks, and imperfect relationships that make up much of our human experience. We imagine that spiritual growth means rising times above times, these muddy realities not realizing that they themselves contain the very wisdom we seek. In Japanese aesthetics, there is a concept called times wabi-sabi, times finding beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. The mud circle embodies this perspective, inviting us to discover profundity in what appears common or flawed. The crack in a teacup, the wrinkles on an aging face, the garden gone slightly wild. These imperfections contain their own unique wisdom and beauty when seen with clear eyes. Zen Master Dogen wrote, "If you cannot find the truth where you are, where do you expect to find it?" This echoes the Buddhist teaching and points to the mistake of externalization, looking outside ourselves for what can only be found within. The temples we build, the rituals we perform, the texts we study, these are all fingers pointing to the moon, not the moon itself. In practical terms, how might we apply the wisdom of the mud circle? We can start by bringing curious attention to the ordinary moments we typically overlook: washing dishes, waiting in line, feeling tired, experiencing conflict. Rather than seeing these as obstacles to our spiritual practice, we can recognize them as the very ground of practice itself. The Buddha said, "My teaching is not a philosophy. It is the result of direct experience." This points to the experiential nature of true wisdom, not something learned intellectually, but realized through immediate contact with life itself. The mud on the road offered this direct experience in a way that observing temple rituals as a spectator could not. Tonight, as you rest, consider the mud circles in your own life, the ordinary, challenging, or uncomfortable aspects you might typically try to avoid or change. Can you bring the same attention to these experiences that you would to a beautiful sunset or a profound spiritual teaching? Can you sense the potential wisdom waiting to be discovered in these unexpected places? As the Buddha taught, all experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, created by mind. When we approach even the muddiest moments with an open, curious mind, we transform them from obstacles into pathways to deeper understanding. Let us now turn to a story about the wisdom of true mastery. This is the story of the master archer. In ancient China, there lived a master archer known throughout the land for his extraordinary skill. His arrows never missed their mark, and his reputation had spread far and wide. The emperor himself had recognized the archer's talents, bestowing upon him honors and riches. One day, a young archer approached the master. Having heard of the elder's legendary abilities, the young man was eager to learn his secrets. "Master," said the young archer, bowing deeply, "I have practiced archery for many years and have achieved some skill, but I wish to reach the highest levels of mastery as you have. Please share with me the technique that makes your arrows never miss." The master archer looked at the young man thoughtfully. "Meet me at dawn tomorrow on the mountain," he said. "Bring your bow and arrows." The next morning, the eager student arrived at the appointed place where the master was waiting. Instead of a practice range with targets, they stood at the edge of a cliff with a deep chasm below. The master led the young archer to the very edge of the precipice, where the ground fell away sharply hundreds of feet to the valley below. Standing at this precarious spot, the master took his position, drew his bow, and shot an arrow into the distance. Then he turned to the student and said, "Now times you times, stand here and shoot." The young archer cautiously approached the edge. Looking down at the dizzying drop, he felt his heart race and his knees weaken. His hands began to tremble as he tried to nock an arrow. After several attempts, he stepped back from the edge, "I cannot shoot from here, master," he said, admitted. "The height makes me dizzy, and fear makes my hands unsteady. How can I hit a target when I am afraid of falling?" The master nodded and spoke gently. "This is the secret you seek. The difference between us is not in technique or strength. It is that when I shoot, there is only the arrow, the bow, and the target. There is no fear, no thought of success or failure, no awareness of being watched or praised. There is not even a self who is shooting. There is only the perfect unity of archer and target." He continued, "You miss your mark, not because your skill is lacking, but because you are divided. Part of you shoots the arrow, while another part fears falling, hopes for success, worries about failure, and remains self-conscious. When you can shoot with your whole being undivided by fear or desire, you will find the mastery you seek." The young archer bowed deeply, understanding that he had received a lesson far more valuable than any technique. He had been shown the true path to mastery, not just in archery, but in all of life. The Buddha taught your work is to discover your world, and then with all your heart give yourself to it. This teaching perfectly captures the essence of the master archer's wisdom. True mastery in any field comes not from technique alone, but from total presence and the dissolution of the separate self that creates division within us. Why do we struggle to achieve this state of undivided attention? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that fragment our awareness. First is our habitual self-consciousness, the part of our mind that stands apart from experience, evaluating our performance, comparing ourselves to others, and seeking validation. This observing ego creates an artificial separation between ourselves and our actions. Second is our attachment to outcomes, our fixation on success or failure, praise or criticism, reward or punishment. When we shoot an arrow literally or metaphorically while obsessing about whether it will hit the target, we introduce tension and hesitation that interfere with natural performance. Third is our fear, the survival instinct that, while necessary in truly dangerous situations, often activates unnecessarily during ordinary challenges. The young archer's fear of falling represented all the ways we hold back from full commitment because of perceived risks to our safety status or self-image. In Japanese Zen, this state of complete absorption is called mushin no mind or zanmi samadhi. It's a condition where the distinction between subject and object dissolves and action flows without the interference of self-conscious thought. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists know it as being carried by the work, and musicians experience it as becoming one with the music. The Buddha said, "Just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise or blame." This steadiness comes not from rigidity, but from complete immersion in the present activity, undistracted by concerns about how others perceive us or whether we measure up to some external standard. Zen practice cultivates this capacity through both formal meditation and mindful engagement with everyday activities. In Zazen, seated meditation, we practice letting go of thoughts, returning again and again to simple presence. In activities like archery, calligraphy, tea ceremony, or martial arts, we train in bringing this same quality of undivided attention to action. In your own life, you've likely experienced moments of this complete absorption. Perhaps while engaged in a sport, creating art, solving a challenging problem, or even during mundane activities like washing dishes or walking in nature. In these moments, the separate self temporarily dissolves and we experience the joy of undivided presence. The Master Archer's lesson applies to everything we do. Whether you're having a conversation, working on a project, caring for a child, or preparing a meal, can you bring your whole being to the activity? Can you notice when you're divided? Part of you present while another part worries, plans, or judges. As the Buddha taught, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. The satisfaction we seek is not in achieving results, but in the quality of presence we bring to each moment. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, can you approach rest with the arch's undivided attention? Rather than trying to force sleep or worrying about getting enough rest, can you simply be with the experience of lying down, feeling the weight of your body on the bed, and following the natural rhythm of your breath? Remember the Buddha's words, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. The tranquility you seek is available in the complete acceptance of this moment just as it is. Let us now explore a story about finding solutions by approaching problems differently. This is the story of the Zen master and the heavy stone. In a small village nestled among mountains, the main road was partially blocked by an enormous stone that had fallen from the cliffs above. The stone was so large and heavy that none of the villagers could move it despite their best efforts. Several strong men had tried pushing it together, but it wouldn't budge. Others had attempted to break it into smaller pieces, but the stone was unusually hard and their tools merely scratched its surface. Some had tried digging around it to roll it away, but the ground was too firm and the stone too deeply embedded. After many failed attempts, the villagers decided to seek help from a Zen master who lived in a monastery nearby. The master was known for his wisdom and creative solutions to difficult problems. When the villagers explained their predicament, the Zen master agreed to come see the stone. A crowd gathered as the elderly master slowly made his way to the obstacle. Everyone expected him to offer some profound technique or organize a better method for moving the heavy boulder. Upon reaching the stone, the master circled it, slowly examining it from all angles with great attention. The villagers waited anxiously by his solution. Finally, the master stopped, looked at the gathered crowd, and asked, "Why must the stone be moved?" The villagers were confused by the question. "Because it blocks the road," one replied. "It makes travel difficult and slows our carts and wagons." The master nodded thoughtfully and said, "The stone blocks one path, but perhaps it creates another." He then guided the villagers in clearing and forming a new path around the stone. With many hands working together, they soon created a smooth alternate route that curved gently around the boulder. Not only did this new path solve their problem, but the massive stone became a landmark, a natural monument that gave their village a unique identity. Children played on it, elders rested in its shade, and over time the villagers came to appreciate the very obstacle they had once resented. Before leaving, the Zen master said to them, "Some obstacles cannot be removed. The wisdom lies in finding a way to live with them or around them. What appears to block your path might actually be showing you a new direction." The Buddha taught as the Fletcher whittles and makes straight his arrows, so the master directs his straying thoughts. This teaching points to the importance of directing our minds skillfully, not forcing them into predetermined paths, but gently guiding them toward creative solutions. The villagers had been so fixated on removing the stone that they couldn't see any alternative approach. Why do we so often get stuck in one way of viewing problems? Zen Buddhism identifies several mental patterns that limit our perspective. First is our attachment to expectations, our fixed ideas about how things should be. The villagers were convinced that the proper solution could only involve moving or breaking the stone because that would restore the road to its original state. Second is what Buddhists call fixed mind or rigid thinking. The inability to adapt our approach when faced with resistance. When our initial efforts don't succeed, we often just try harder using the same method rather than stepping back to reconsider our entire approach. Third is our failure to question our assumptions. The villagers assumed that the problem was the stone itself rather than their relationship to it. By reframing the situation, the stone isn't the problem. Our need for a path is. The Zen master opened up new possibilities that were invisible from within the original framework. Zen practice cultivates mental flexibility through coins, paradoxical stories or questions that cannot be solved through conventional thinking. Famous koans like "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" or "What was your original face before your parents were born?" deliberately short-circuit logical analysis, forcing the mind to operate in new ways. This training develops what Zen calls lateral thinking, the ability to approach problems from unexpected angles. The Buddha said we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. When our thoughts remain trapped in familiar patterns, our solutions will be equally limited. By cultivating mental flexibility, we open ourselves to innovative approaches that may be hidden in plain sight. In your own life, consider a challenge you've been struggling with. Perhaps a relationship difficulty, a work problem, or a personal obstacle. Have you been pushing against your heavy stone, attempting the same solution repeatedly with minimal success? What might happen if, like the Zen master, you stepped back and questioned your fundamental assumptions about the problem? The Japanese concept of ma, the space between things, offers additional insight. Sometimes the solution lies not in the elements themselves, but in the relationship between them. The villagers found their answer not in the stone or the road as separate entities, but in reconsidering how they could relate to each other. Tonight, as you reflect on challenges in your life, experiment with the Zen master's approach. Ask yourself, what if this obstacle isn't something to be removed, but something to be integrated? What new path might it be revealing? Remember the Buddha's teaching. No matter how hard the past, you can always begin again. Each moment offers a fresh opportunity to see with new eyes and discover solutions hidden beyond our usual perspective. Let us turn to a story about the power of letting go and the freedom it brings. This is the story of the two traveling monks. Two Buddhist monks, Tanzan and Aikido, were once traveling together down a muddy road in the countryside during the rainy season. Heavy rains had fallen, leaving the road flooded in many places and making their journey difficult. As they rounded a bend, they came upon a lovely young woman in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross a large muddy puddle that blocked the path. She stood hesitating at the edge, clearly distressed about how to proceed without ruining her beautiful clothes. Without a word, Tanzan went to the woman, picked her up in his arms, carried her across the muddy water, and set her down safely on the other side. The woman thanked him with a bow and continued on her way. The two monks walked on in silence for several hours. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, Aikido spoke out. "Brother Tanzan," he said, "we monks are not supposed to go near females, especially young and lovely ones. It is dangerous." "Why did you do that?" Tanzan replied calmly. "I left the girl there by the river." "Are you still carrying her?" Aikido was stunned into silence, suddenly aware of the burden he had been carrying for hours. Not a physical woman, but the weight of judgment, concern, and mental agitation. While Tanzan had responded to a momentary need with compassion and then returned fully to the present journey, Aikido had been dwelling on the incident long after it was over. The Buddha taught, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, and cross over to the farther shore of existence. This teaching perfectly captures Tanzan's wisdom. He understood that true freedom comes not from rigid adherence to external rules, but from maintaining internal freedom. The ability to respond appropriately to each situation and then move on without lingering attachment. Why do we, like Aikido, so often carry unnecessary mental burdens? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that keep us clinging to what we should release. First is our tendency toward rumination. Repeatedly thinking about past events we cannot change. This mental habit consumes energy that could be directed toward the present moment and often reinforces negative emotions like anger, guilt, or anxiety. Second is our attachment to rules over principles. Aikido was so focused on the letter of the monastic rule, avoiding contact with women, that he missed its spirit, cultivating purity of mind and intention. Tanzan, by contrast, understood that compassion sometimes requires breaking conventions, and that true purity lies in the absence of selfish desire, not in rigid rule following. Third is what Buddhists call papanka, mental proliferation or elaboration. One thought leads to another, and another, creating complex narratives that exist only in our minds. Aikido's initial observation led to hours of internal commentary about propriety, risk, and his companion's behavior, all unnecessary and self-created suffering. Zen practice trains us to recognize when we're carrying something that could be put down. Through meditation, we develop the capacity to observe our thoughts without being carried away by them. We learn to distinguish between helpful reflection and unhelpful rumination. And we cultivate the ability to return again and again to the simplicity and freedom of the present moment. The Buddha said, "In the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you." This teaching invites us to consider what we might be carrying that no longer serves us. Resentments from past injuries, anxiety about future uncertainties, or judgments about ourselves and others. In Japanese Zen, there is a concept called session, which literally means touching the mind-heart. During intensive meditation retreats, practitioners have the opportunity to notice what they've been unnecessarily carrying and experience the lightness that comes from setting these burdens down. This letting go isn't about forgetting or denying our experiences, but about preventing them from becoming obstacles to living fully in the present. In your daily life, notice when you're carrying something long after the actual event has ended. Perhaps replaying a conversation, worrying about a mistake, or nurturing a grievance. Can you, like Tanzan, respond appropriately to what each moment requires and then return to the present without residue? The Buddha taught happiness never decreases by being shared. Similarly, our peace of mind never decreases by letting go of what no longer needs to be carried. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, experiment with setting down whatever mental burdens you've been carrying throughout the day. Imagine placing each concern, each unresolved situation, each judgment or worry gently on the ground beside you. They will still be there in the morning if you need to pick them up again. But for now, feel the lightness and spaciousness that comes from traveling unburdened, even if just for the night. Remember Tanzan's wisdom. True freedom lies not in avoiding life's muddy waters, but in crossing them when necessary, and then continuing on your way with an uncluttered heart. Let us explore a story about the power of inner silence. This is the cricket in the temple. In a bustling Japanese city, a magnificent temple stood for centuries, its golden roof gleaming in the sunday. Despite being surrounded by the noise of modern life traffic, construction crowds of tourists within its walls, a sense of profound peace prevailed. One day, a young musician visited the temple. Having studied both music and meditation, he was curious about the quality of silence that seemed to permeate the sacred space. As he sat quietly in a corner of the main hall, he closed his eyes and focused on his hearing, trying to understand what made this silence so special. To his surprise, beneath the occasional footsteps of visitors and the distant city noise, he detected a subtle rhythmic sound so faint it was almost imperceptible. Curious, he followed the sound to its source and discovered a tiny cricket living in a small crack in one of the ancient wooden pillars. The musician was amazed. How could such a tiny creature be heard in this vast space? He approached an elderly monk who was sweeping the temple floor and asked, "Venerable, "One, have you noticed there's a cricket living in that pillar?" The old monk smiled. "Ah, you've heard our little friend. He has lived in the temple for many years. But how is it possible that such a tiny sound can be heard in this large temple with all the noise from the city outside?" the musician asked. The monk put down his broom and gestured for the young man to follow him. He led the musician to the entrance of the temple and reached into his robe, pulling out a single coin. "Watch," he said. He dropped the coin onto the stone floor. At the sound of the coin falling, nearly every visitor in the crowded temple turned their heads to look. The monk turned to the puzzled musician. "People hear what they are listening for," he said gently. "The coin is no louder than the cricket, but everyone notices it because money speaks a language all are trained to hear. The cricket sings day and night, but few notice because they are not listening for such voices." He continued, "Those who quiet their inner noise can hear what others miss. Not just crickets, but the whispers of wisdom that speak constantly beneath the clamor of everyday life. True silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of attention." The young musician bowed deeply, understanding that he had received a teaching far more valuable than any musical technique. He had been shown the difference between hearing and listening, between external quiet and true inner silence. The Buddha taught, "He who is patient is the greatest warrior." This teaching relates profoundly to our capacity for inner silence. The greatest battles are often fought not against external enemies, but against our own internal noise. The constant chatter of thoughts, judgments, desires, and fears that drown out the subtle wisdom available in each moment. Why do we struggle to hear the crickets in our lives? Zen Buddhism points to several factors that create inner noise. First is our conditioning to value certain inputs over others. Just as everyone noticed the falling coin, but few heard the cricket, we're trained to pay attention to dramatic events, loud voices, and urgent demands while overlooking subtle experiences that might contain deeper truth. Second is what Zen calls monkey mind. The restless, agitated quality of consciousness that jumps constantly from thought to thought, rarely settling long enough to perceive what lies beneath surface appearances. This internal chatter creates a veil between us and direct experience, filtering reality through layers of concept and commentary. Third is our diminished capacity for wonder and presence. Children naturally notice crickets, ants, cloud patterns, and other subtle phenomena because they haven't yet learned to dismiss the seemingly insignificant. As adults, we often lose this capacity for direct, unfiltered perception, missing the extraordinary that hides within the ordinary. Zen practice cultivates what might be called active silence. Not the absence of thought, but a quality of alert receptivity that allows us to perceive beyond our habitual patterns. Through meditation, we train ourselves to notice when we're caught in internal monologue and gently return to simple presence. This is not about suppressing thoughts, but about developing the capacity to hear what exists beneath and between them. The Buddha said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think we become. When our minds are filled with constant noise, we become noisy ourselves, distracted, fragmented, and unable to access the deeper wisdom available in silence." In Japanese aesthetics, there is a concept called ma, the meaningful pause or empty space that gives form to the whole. In music, it's the silence between notes that creates rhythm. In conversation, it's the attentive pause that allows for deeper understanding. In life itself, it's the quiet moments of receptivity that often contain the most profound insights. The cricket in the temple represents all the subtle voices of wisdom speaking constantly beneath the surface of our awareness. The intuitions we ignore, the natural rhythms we override, the quiet warnings we dismiss, and the gentle beauty we overlook. When we cultivate inner silence, these voices become audible, offering guidance and insight unavailable to the noisy mind. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet of this moment, can you listen beyond your thoughts to the subtle crickets in your awareness? Perhaps you'll notice the rhythm of your breathing, sensations in your body you typically overlook, or intuitive wisdom about a situation in your life. As the Buddha taught, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. In cultivating this inner silence, we discover that the wisdom we seek has been speaking to us all along. We simply haven't been still enough to hear it. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us explore a story that teaches us about the power of presence. This is the Zen master and the strawberries. A Zen student came to his master with a troubled heart. "Master," he said, "I have been studying Zen for 3 years now, but my mind is still restless. When I sit in meditation, thoughts flood in. When I try to be mindful during the day, I find myself constantly distracted by worries about the future and regrets about the past. How can I find peace?" The master listened attentively, then said, "Come with me. I wish to show you something." He led the student out of the monastery and down a narrow mountain path. They walked in silence for nearly an hour until they came to a high cliff overlooking a breathtaking valley. Far below, a river wound its way through forests and meadows, glittering in the afternoon sunday. The master gestured for the student to sit near the edge of the cliff. When they were both seated comfortably, the master reached into his robe and pulled out 2 perfectly ripe strawberries, placing one before each of them. "Eat," said the master, picking up his strawberry. The student, though confused by this seemingly trivial instruction in the face of his profound spiritual question, obeyed. He picked up the strawberry and bit into it. The flavor was extraordinary, sweet, tart, and intensely fragrant. He had eaten strawberries many times before, but somehow this one tasted different. As they ate in silence, the master observed the student's expression of surprised delight. When they had finished, the master spoke. "Tell me," he said, "while you were eating the strawberry, where was your mind?" The student reflected for a moment. "It was here," he realized. "I was completely absorbed in the taste of the strawberry." And during those moments, the master continued, "Were you troubled by thoughts of the past or future? Were you distracted by worries or regrets?" "No," the student said, understanding beginning to dawn. "There was only the strawberry." The master smiled. "This is the peace you seek. It is not found by eliminating thoughts or achieving some special state. It is found in complete presence with whatever is right in front of you. Whether it's a strawberry, a breath, a task, or even a difficult emotion. When you are fully present, past and future cannot touch you. They exist only in thought. And when thought dissolves into pure experience, peace naturally emerges." I have to admit, the student said, "the height up here makes me a little queasy, and my fear is definitely making my hands shake. How am I supposed to nail that target when I'm worried about falling?" The master just nodded, his voice calm and reassuring. "This is exactly what you've been searching for," he said. "The difference between you and me isn't about some super advanced technique or having incredible strength. It's about what happens in your mind when you release that arrow. When I shoot, all that exists is the arrow, the bow, and the target. Fear gone. Thoughts of succeeding or failing, they vanish. Even the awareness of people watching or the possibility of getting praised doesn't even register. It's like the person shooting disappears, completely leaving only the perfect connection between the archer and the target." He went on, "You're missing because your mind is split. Part of you is pulling back the string, but another part is scared of falling, hoping to win, or stressing about messing up, and super aware of how you look to everyone else. You need to get to a place where your whole being is focused, where there's no room for fear or wanting things. That's when you'll find what you're looking for. The young archer gave a deep bow. He finally understood that he'd just learned something far more important than just how to shoot an arrow. He'd been shown the real path to mastering anything, not just archery, but everything in life. The Buddha put it this way: your job is to discover your world and then pour your whole heart into it. This simple idea is exactly what the master archer was trying to get across. Achieving true mastery in any field doesn't just come from being technically skilled. It comes from being completely present in what you're doing and getting rid of that separate self inside you that causes you to be divided. So why is it so tough for us to focus all our attention like that? Zen Buddhism points to a few things that tend to mess with our focus. First, we're constantly thinking about ourselves. That little voice in your head that's always critiquing how you're doing, comparing you to others, and wanting approval. This observing ego creates this artificial wall between who you are and what you're doing. Second, we get way too caught up in the results. We're obsessed with whether we'll win or lose, get praise or criticism, get a reward or a punishment. If you're shooting an arrow, or doing anything else for that matter, and you're busy worrying about hitting the bullseye, you're going to create tension and hesitation that totally throws off your natural ability. Third, there's fear. That survival instinct is great when you're actually in danger, but it often kicks in way too easily during regular everyday challenges. That young archer's fear of falling represents all the ways we hold ourselves back from going all in because we're afraid of risking our safety, our reputation, or how we see ourselves. In Japanese Zen, they have a term for this state of being totally absorbed times mushin times, which means no mind, or times zanmai times, which is similar to samadhi. It's when you lose that sense of separation between you and what you're doing, and your actions just flow without you having to think about them. Athletes sometimes call it being in the zone. Artists know it as being carried by the work, and musicians feel like they become one with the music. The Buddha once said, "Just like a solid rock doesn't get shaken by a storm, the wise aren't bothered by praise or criticism." This kind of stability doesn't come from being stiff or unyielding. It comes from being totally immersed in what you're doing right now, not getting distracted by what other people think, or whether you're measuring up to some outside standard. Zen practice helps you develop this skill through both meditation and being mindful in your everyday activities. In Zazen, which is seated meditation, you practice letting go of thoughts, just gently coming back to being present. And in activities like archery, calligraphy, the tea ceremony, or martial arts, you practice bringing that same focus to your actions. You've probably had times like this in your own life. Maybe when you were playing a sport, making art, figuring out a tricky problem, or even just doing something simple like washing dishes or taking a walk in nature. In those moments, you lose that sense of being a separate self, and you get to experience the joy of being completely present. That master archer's lesson applies to everything. Whether you're having a conversation, working on a project, taking care of your kids, or making dinner, can you really be there fully present in what you're doing? Can you notice when you're getting distracted, when part of you is present, but another part is worrying, planning, or judging, like the Buddha taught? There's no path times to times happiness. Happiness times is times the path. The satisfaction we're all looking for isn't about getting a certain result. It's about the quality of presence we bring to every single moment. Tonight, as you're getting ready for bed, can you approach resting with that same kind of undivided attention? Instead of trying to force yourself to fall asleep or fretting about getting enough rest, can you just be with the experience? of lying down, feeling how your body feels on the bed, and just following the natural rhythm of your breath. Remember what the Buddha said, peace comes from within. Don't go looking for it anywhere else. The calm you're seeking is right there, in the complete acceptance of this moment, exactly as it is. Now let's look at a story about finding creative solutions by looking at problems in a different way. This is the story about the Zen master and the heavy stone. In a little village nestled in the mountains, the main road was blocked by this massive boulder that had fallen from the cliffs above. It was so huge and heavy that no matter how hard the villagers tried, they just couldn't move it. Some of the strongest guys tried pushing it all together, but it didn't even budge. Others tried to break it into smaller pieces, but the stone was super hard and their tools barely scratched it. Some even tried digging around it to roll it away, but the ground was too hard and the stone was stuck too deep. After trying everything they could think of, the villagers decided to ask for help from a Zen master who lived in a nearby monastery. He was known for his wisdom and his knack for finding creative solutions to tough problems. When they told him about their situation, he agreed to come and take a look at the stone. A crowd gathered as the old master slowly made his way to the obstacle. Everyone was expecting him to come up with some amazing technique or organize some better way to move the boulder. But when he got to the stone, he just walked around it slowly, looking at it from every angle, really paying attention. The villagers waited, anxious to hear what he would suggest. Finally, he stopped, looked at everyone, and asked, "Why does this stone have times to be moved?" The villagers were totally confused. "Because it's blocking the road," one of them replied. "It's making it hard to get around, and it's slowing down our carts and wagons." The master nodded thoughtfully and said, "The stone is blocking one time's path, but maybe it's creating another." Then he guided the villagers to clear the area and create a new path that went around the stone. With everyone working together, they quickly made a smooth new route that curved gently around the boulder. Not only did this solve their problem, but that massive stone became a landmark, a natural monument that gave their village something special. Kids started playing on it. The elderly sat in its shade. And over time, the villagers actually started to appreciate that obstacle they had once resented. Before he left, the Zen master told them some obstacles just can't be removed. The key is to find a way to live with them or go around them. What looks like it's blocking your path might actually be showing you a new direction. The Buddha taught, "As the fletcher whittles and makes straight his arrows, so the master directs his straying thoughts." This teaching highlights how important it is to guide our minds skillfully, not trying to force them down a certain path, but gently leading them towards creative solutions. The villagers were so focused on getting rid of the stone that they couldn't see any other way to deal with the problem. Why do we so often get stuck in one way of thinking? Zen Buddhism points out a few mental habits that limit how we see things. First, we get attached to our expectations, those fixed ideas about how things should be. The villagers were sure that the only solution was to move or break the stone, because that would put the road back to how it was before. Second, there's what Buddhists call fixed mind or rigid thinking. That's when you can't adapt your approach when you run into resistance. When what you try at first doesn't work, you just keep trying harder using the same method instead of stepping back and rethinking your whole approach. Third, we often don't question our assumptions. The villagers just assumed that the stone was the problem rather than their relationship to it. By looking at it differently, the stone wasn't the problem anymore. Their times for a path was. The Zen master opened up new possibilities that they couldn't see before. Zen practice helps you develop mental flexibility through time's koans asterisk. These are paradoxical stories or questions that can't be answered with regular logical thinking. Famous examples are, "What's the sound of one hand clapping?" or "What did your face look like before your parents were born?" They're designed to short-circuit your usual way of thinking and force your mind to work in a new way. This kind of training develops what Zen calls lateral thinking, the ability to approach problems from unexpected angles. The Buddha said, "We are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. When our thoughts get stuck in familiar patterns, our solutions will be just as limited. But by developing mental flexibility, we can open ourselves up to innovative approaches that might be hidden right in front of us." Think about a challenge you've been dealing with in your own life, like a relationship problem, a work issue, or something personal. Have you been pushing against your own heavy stone, trying the same thing over and over again with little success? What would happen if, like the Zen master, you took a step back and questioned your basic assumptions about the problem? The Japanese concept of times ma times, which means the space between things, can also give you some insight. Sometimes the solution isn't about the things themselves, but about how they relate to each other. The villagers found their answer, not in the stone or the road as separate things, but by rethinking how they could relate to each other. Tonight, when you're reflecting on the challenges in your life, try using the Zen master's approach. Ask yourself, what if this obstacle isn't something I need to get rid of, but something I need to integrate? What new path might it be revealing to me? Remember the Buddhist teaching, no matter how tough the past has been, you can always start over. Every moment is a chance to see things with fresh eyes and find solutions that are hidden beyond our usual way of looking at things. Let's move on to a story about the power of letting go and the freedom it brings. This is the story of the two traveling monks. Two Buddhist monks, Tanzan and Aikido, were traveling together down a muddy road in the countryside during the rainy season. It had been raining hard, and the road was flooded in a lot of places, which made their journey really difficult. As they came around a bend, they saw a beautiful young woman in a silk kimono and sash. She was standing by a big muddy puddle, unable to cross it. She looked upset because she didn't want to ruin her nice clothes. Without saying a word, Tanzan walked over to the woman, picked her up, carried her across the muddy water, and gently put her down on the other side. The woman thanked him with a bow and went on her way. The two monks kept walking in silence for several hours. Finally, Aikido couldn't hold it in any longer. "Brother Tanzan," he said, "we monks aren't supposed to get near women, especially young and pretty ones. It's dangerous." "Why did you do that?" Tanzan calmly replied. "I left that girl back there by the river. Are you still carrying her?" Aikido was shocked into silence. He suddenly realized the burden he had been carrying for hours. It wasn't the physical woman, but the weight of his judgment, worry, and mental stress. Tanzan had simply responded to the situation with compassion and then moved on, fully present in their journey. Aikido, on the other hand, had been dwelling on the incident for hours after it was over. The Buddha taught, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, and cross over to the farther shore of existence. This teaching perfectly captures Tanzan's wisdom. He understood that true freedom doesn't come from rigidly following external rules. It comes from being free on the inside, being able to respond to each situation appropriately, and then moving on without holding on to anything. Why do we, like Aikido, so often carry around unnecessary mental baggage? Zen Buddhism identifies a few things that make us cling to what we should be releasing. First, we tend to ruminate, which means we keep thinking about past events we can't change. This uses up energy that could be used for the present moment, and often makes us feel even worse, like angry, guilty, or anxious. Second, we get too attached to rules instead of principles. Aikido was so focused on the exact wording of the monastic rule about avoiding contact with women that he missed the bigger point, which was to cultivate purity of mind and intention. Tanzan, on the other hand, understood that compassion sometimes means breaking the rules, and that true purity comes from not having selfish desires, not from blindly following rules. Third, there's what Buddhists call times papanka times, which means mental proliferation or elaboration. One thought leads to another, and another, creating these complex stories that only exist in our minds. Aikido's initial observation led to hours of him internally commenting on whether it was proper, what the risks were, and what Tanzan was doing. It was all unnecessary and self-created suffering. Zen practice teaches us to recognize when we're carrying something that we could put down. Through meditation, we learn to observe our thoughts without getting carried away by them. We learn the difference between helpful reflection and unhelpful rumination. And we learn to keep coming back to the simplicity and freedom of the present moment. The Buddha said, in the end, only 3 things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things that weren't meant for you. This invites us to think about what we might be holding on to that's no longer helping us, like resentments from past hurts, worries about the future, or judging ourselves and others. In Japanese Zen, there's a concept called time session times, which literally means touching the mind-heart. During these intensive meditation retreats, people have the chance to see what they've been. The student protested that the strawberry was easy to connect with because it was so enjoyable. But what happens when I'm faced with something difficult or painful? An excellent question, the master said, nodding in agreement. The practice is the same, although it's definitely more challenging. Whether you're facing a strawberry or a snake, joy or sorrow, praise or blame, presence is always available. The nature of what you're facing might change, but the quality of awareness you bring to it doesn't have to. That's the great freedom of Zen practice. The student bowed deeply, expressing his gratitude for the teaching. From that day forward, he approached his practice in a new way. Instead of struggling to eliminate thoughts or try to reach a peaceful state, he concentrated on bringing complete presence to each moment, each activity, each breath. To his surprise, he discovered that the peace he had been seeking had been available all along in the most ordinary experiences of his life. The Buddha taught, don't dwell in the past. Don't dream about the future. Concentrate your mind on the present moment. This teaching points to the direct path to peace, not through escaping our current experience, but by fully living it. The strawberry represents any ordinary moment that, when we meet it with complete presence, reveals itself to be extraordinary. Why do we struggle so much with being present? Zen Buddhism identifies several patterns that pull us away from the here and now. First, there's our habitual time traveling. The mind's tendency to constantly swing between the past and the future, reviewing what has happened or anticipating what might happen. This mental back and forth is so constant that we barely notice it, yet it continually removes us from direct experience. Second, there's our evaluation system. The mind's automatic sorting of experiences into categories of pleasant, unpleasant, desirable, undesirable, important, or unimportant. This constant evaluation creates a subtle resistance to what's actually happening, as we mentally reach for what we prefer and push away what we don't. Third, there's our search for special experiences. The belief that peace or happiness must come in a particular package with specific qualities that are different from our ordinary life. This misunderstanding leads us to overlook the profound beauty and completeness available in simple moments like tasting a strawberry. The Japanese concept of times ichigo ichi asterisk, one time, one meeting, captures the preciousness of each unrepeatable moment. It reminds us that this particular experience, this breath, this sensation, this interaction will never occur exactly the same way again. When we truly understand this, presence becomes not just a practice, but something that naturally happens because we want to show up completely for the unique gift of each moment. Zen practice trains this capacity for presence through both formal meditation and everyday activities. In times, zazen times, or seated meditation, we repeatedly notice when the mind has wandered and gently return to the simplicity of breath and posture. In daily life, activities like walking, eating, cleaning, or working become opportunities to practice that same return to presence. The Buddha said the secret of health for both mind and body is not to mourn for the past, worry about the future, or anticipate troubles, but to live in the present moment wisely and earnestly. This wisdom reminds us that presence isn't just a spiritual practice. It's the foundation of well-being in all aspects of life. Tonight, as you rest, can you bring that same strawberry eating presence to the experience of preparing for sleep? Can you feel the weight and texture of your body against the bed, the rhythm of your breathing, the gradual relaxation of your muscles? As the Buddha taught, wherever you are, be there completely. In this complete presence lies the peace that has been available all along, waiting only for our full attention to reveal itself. Let's now turn to a story about clearing away the obstacles to our true nature. This is about polishing the mirror. A young monk approached his Zen master after years of dedicated practice. Despite his sincere efforts in meditation and study, he felt that enlightenment was still out of reach. "Master," he asked, his frustration evident, "I've been practicing diligently for 7 years now. I follow all the precepts. I meditate faithfully every day. I study the sutras with dedication, yet I feel no closer to enlightenment than when I began. What am I doing wrong?" The old master looked at the monk with compassion. Instead of answering directly, he led the young man to a storage room at the back of the monastery. There, covered in dust and hidden behind piles of scrolls and ceremonial implements, sat an ancient mirror. Once beautiful and reflective, its surface was now completely obscured by years of dust, grime, and oxidation. "Do you see this mirror?" the master asked. "Yes," replied the monk, somewhat confused by the seemingly irrelevant question. "Was this mirror created by the dust that covers it?" The monk frowned. "No, of course not. The mirror exists independently of the dust. The dust just covers what's already there. And if someone wanted to see their reflection in this mirror, what would they need to do?" the master continued. "They would need to clean it, to remove the dust and polish the surface," the monk answered, starting to understand the teaching. The master nodded and handed the young monk a soft cloth. "Please clean this mirror." Day after day, the monk worked on cleaning the ancient mirror. The accumulated grime of decades didn't come off easily. He tried different methods: water, oil, fine ash, special polishing compounds. Gradually, with patient and persistent effort, the mirror's surface began to emerge. After many weeks of dedicated work, the mirror was completely restored, its surface now gleaming and perfectly reflective. When the work was complete, the master came to inspect it. Looking at the brilliantly polished mirror, he asked, "Did your efforts create the mirror's reflective nature?" "No," the monk replied. "The mirror always had the ability to reflect. My cleaning simply removed what was hiding this inherent quality." "It's the same with your Buddha nature," the master explained gently. "Enlightenment isn't something you achieve or create through your practice. Your true nature, clear, luminous, and perfectly reflective of reality, has been present from the beginning. Your practice isn't about adding something that's missing, but removing the things that hide what has always been there." The master continued, "The dust represents your attachments, aversions, and delusions. all the mental patterns that cloud your inherent clarity. Meditation precepts and study are like the cloth you use to polish the mirror. They don't create enlightenment, they reveal what has always been your original face. With this understanding, the young monk's approach to practice changed completely. Instead of striving to reach some idealized state, he now understood his work as a process of recognition and removal, recognizing the dust of conditioning as it appeared and gently cleaning it away to allow his inherent Buddha nature to shine forth naturally. The Buddha taught the mind is everything, what you think you become. This teaching points to the powerful way our thoughts and mental patterns can either hide or reveal our true nature. Like dust on a mirror, our conditioned patterns of thinking and perceiving cover the clear awareness that is our birthright. Why does the dust accumulate so persistently? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that contribute to this obscuration. First, there's what Buddhists call ignorance times avidya asterisk. Not a lack of intelligence, but a fundamental misunderstanding of our true nature. This basic confusion leads us to identify with the dust rather than the mirror beneath it. Second, there are our habitual self-reinforcing patterns. Each thought of separation, each emotional reaction, each act based on a limited self-concept adds another layer of dust to the mirror. These patterns build upon each other, creating what seems like an impenetrable coating over our natural clarity. Third, there's our cultural conditioning, which often emphasizes achievement, acquisition, and improvement rather than recognition, clearing, and allowing. We're taught that we have to add something to ourselves to be complete rather than removing what obscures our inherent completeness. The Japanese term time session times literally means touching the mind-heart, which beautifully captures the practice of removing dust from the mirror. In touching our mind-heart directly, we connect with what has always been present beneath the obscurations, our Buddha nature, our original face before our parents were born. Zen practice is fundamentally a cleaning process. Meditation trains us to recognize thoughts, emotions, and sensations as they arise without being carried away by them. Ethical precepts help us avoid creating more dust through harmful actions. Wisdom teachings point us back to our true nature, encouraging us to look beneath the surface of appearances to the clear mirror that reflects it all. The Buddha said, "What we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow." Our life is the creation of our mind. This teaching reminds us that the dust isn't permanent. It can be cleaned away through aware attention to our present thoughts and actions. In your daily life, notice when the mirror of your awareness becomes clouded by stress, worry, judgment, or reactivity. Instead of fighting against these states or being consumed by them, can you recognize them as temporary dust on your inherent clarity? The Buddha taught nothing is permanent. Everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming. This impermanence applies not only to external conditions, but to our internal states as well, including the dust that seems to obscure our clear nature. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, imagine the day's accumulated dust of thoughts, emotions, and experiences gently being wiped away, revealing the clear, reflective surface of your inherent awareness. As the Buddha said, "Look within, thou art the Buddha." The pristine mirror of your true nature has been present all along, waiting only for the patient, loving work of clearing away what obscures it. Let's now explore a story about simplicity and the direct path to understanding. This is pointing at the moon. One evening, a Zen master was walking with his disciple under a brilliant full moon. The night was clear, and the moonlight illuminated the garden path, creating patterns of silver light and deep shadow. As they walked in companionable silence, the master noticed the disciple was troubled, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What troubles you?" asked the master. "Master," replied the disciple, "I've been studying the sutras diligently, but the more I read, the more confused I become. One text seems to contradict another. Some emphasize rigorous practice, others sudden enlightenment. Some focus on compassion, others on wisdom. I can't unify all these teachings into a coherent understanding." The master listened attentively, then suddenly stopped walking and pointed to the full moon hanging in the night sky. "Look," he said simply. The disciple looked up at the moon, its perfect circle glowing against the darkness. "Tell me," said the master, "are you looking at my finger or at the moon?" "At the moon, of course," replied the disciple, somewhat confused by the question. "And did you need to analyze or study my finger in order to see the moon?" "No," said the disciple. "Your finger merely pointed the way." The master nodded. "The sutras, the teachings, the methods, these are all fingers pointing at the moon. They aren't the moon itself. They direct us toward direct experience of reality, but they aren't that reality. If you focus too much on the finger, analyzing it, comparing it to other fingers, debating its merits, you might completely miss what it's pointing toward." The master continued walking, and after a few steps added, "The teachings might seem contradictory because they're addressing different people with different needs or describing different aspects of the same reality, like many fingers pointing at the same moon from different angles. But the moon itself isn't divided or contradictory. When you look directly at it, there's only moonlight, perfectly unified and complete." The disciple fell silent, contemplating this teaching. As they continued their walk, he found himself less preoccupied with intellectual understanding and more present with the direct experience of moonlight, the sound of crickets, and the feeling of the evening breeze. For the first time, he understood that the path to wisdom lay not in accumulating concepts, but in opening to the direct experience that the concepts were merely pointing toward. "The Buddha taught my teaching is like a finger pointing to the moon. Don't mistake the finger for the moon." This profound instruction warns against the human tendency to become attached to spiritual teachings rather than allowing them to guide us toward direct experience of reality. Why do we so readily confuse the finger for the moon? Zen Buddhism identifies several factors that lead to this common confusion. First, there's our deeply ingrained habit of conceptual thinking. From early childhood, we're trained to understand the world through concepts, categories, and abstractions. This conceptual overlay becomes so pervasive that we often mistake our mental maps for the territory they represent. Second, there's our cultural conditioning toward knowledge acquisition rather than experiential wisdom. Particularly in educational systems, we're rewarded for gathering and organizing information rather than for direct insight or embodied understanding. This conditioning carries over into spiritual practice, where we may unconsciously approach enlightenment as another form of knowledge to acquire. Third, there's the comfort of the known versus the uncertainty of direct experience. Concepts, theories, and doctrines provide a sense of security and control. They can be grasped, organized, and possessed by the mind. Direct experience, by contrast, often brings us face to face with the vast unknown, the groundless ground of being that transcends our conceptual frameworks. The Japanese term times shikantaza times means just sitting and represents the essence of Zen's direct approach. Rather than engaging with concepts about reality, we simply sit, allowing direct experience to reveal itself without interference from our categorizing mind. This practice embodies the spirit of looking at the moon rather than analyzing the finger. In Zen, even teachings about non-attachment to teachings can become a finger mistaken for the moon. That's why Zen often employs paradox silence or unexpected actions to disrupt our conceptual thinking and point directly to experience beyond words. The master who holds up a flower, the teacher who gives a shout, the sudden sound of a stick striking the floor, these all serve to jolt us out of conceptual understanding into direct perception. The Buddha said, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your path. This teaching reminds us that the finger of doctrine exists to illuminate our way, not to become an object of attachment. When we use teachings appropriately, as guides rather than goals, they naturally lead us toward the clarity they were designed to reveal. In your own spiritual or personal development journey, notice when you might be focusing more on fingers than moons. Maybe you find yourself debating theoretical aspects of a teaching while missing its practical application, or collecting spiritual concepts and insights without allowing them to transform your direct lived experience, or comparing different paths and methods rather than walking the one before you with full presence. Tonight, as you rest in awareness, can you let go of all concepts about relaxation, sleep, or even these stories you're hearing? Can you move beyond the fingers of instruction to the moon of direct experience as the Buddha taught? The whole path of mindfulness is this: whatever you're doing, be aware of it. This simple pointing is all we need if we look where it's directing us rather than fixating on the pointer itself. Let's now turn to a story about our relationship with challenges and obstacles. This is the farmer's horse. In a small village nestled among rolling hills, there lived an old farmer who was known for his equanimity. No matter what happened, good or bad, he maintained the same peaceful demeanor and often responded to news with a simple phrase, "We'll see." One day, the farmer's only horse, essential for plowing his fields and transporting his crops to market, broke through the fence and ran away. When neighbors heard about this misfortune, they gathered at his home to offer sympathy. "What terrible luck!" they exclaimed. "Your only horse is gone. How will you manage the farm now? This is such a tragedy." The old farmer listened to their concerns and simply replied, "We'll see." A week later, the farmer's horse returned to the farm. But it wasn't alone. It brought with it a herd of wild horses that had followed it back. Now the farmer, who had owned just one horse, suddenly had a dozen magnificent animals in his corral. When the neighbors heard this news, they rushed back to the farmer's home, this time to congratulate him on his extraordinary good fortune. "What amazing luck," they declared. "Now you have many strong horses. You'll be the richest farmer in the village." The farmer thanked them for their enthusiasm, but again responded, "We'll see." The following day, the farmer's only son began the work of training these wild horses. While attempting to break one particularly spirited stallion, he was thrown to the ground and broke his leg badly. The neighbors once again gathered, now offering condolences for this stroke of bad luck. "How unfortunate," they said. "Your son is injured and can't help with the farm work. With the harvest coming, this is surely a disaster." As before, the old farmer acknowledged their concern but replied, "We'll see." Within a week, military officials came to the village, conscripting all able-bodied young men to fight in a war that had just been declared against a neighboring kingdom. It was a dangerous conflict, and everyone knew that many of those taken would never return. Because of his broken leg, the farmer's son was passed over and allowed to remain home. The neighbors whose sons had been taken away came to the farmer in tears, expressing both their sorrow for themselves and their admiration for what now appeared to be the farmer's incredible good luck. The farmer listened compassionately to their mixed emotions and once again said simply, "We'll see." The Buddha taught, don't judge by appearances. Find the truth behind all form. This wisdom is perfectly embodied in the farmer's story. His consistent response of "we'll see" reflects a profound understanding that no event can be fully judged in isolation. Its meaning and impact continue to unfold within a complex web of causes and conditions. Why do we rush to categorize experiences as fortunate or unfortunate? Zen Buddhism points to our mind's habitual dualistic thinking, its tendency to sort all experiences into binary categories like good, bad, desirable, undesirable, helpful, or harmful. This automatic sorting gives us a sense of orientation and control, but it often prevents us from perceiving the complex, ever-changing nature of reality. The Japanese concept of times fubunbetsu times refers to the mind that doesn't divide experiences into categories of like and dislike. It's a mind that remains open to the full spectrum of what unfolds, without immediately filtering it through preferences. The farmer exemplifies this quality through his ability to hold each development with spacious awareness rather than reactive judgment. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh teaches about interbeing, the profound interconnectedness of all phenomena. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is related to everything else in countless ways. The farmer's story illustrates this principle clearly. The unfortunate loss of his horse led to the fortunate acquisition of many horses, which led to the unfortunate injury of his son, which led to the fortunate avoidance of military service. Each event flowed into the next in an unbroken stream of causes and effects. The Buddha said, if we could see the miracle of a single flower, clearly our whole life would change. This teaching points to the depth and complexity present in even the simplest phenomena. When we truly perceive without the filter of our hasty judgments, we recognize that nothing is as simple as it first appears. Each experience contains multiple dimensions and carries the potential for developments we can't foresee. Zen practice cultivates this capacity for suspended judgment through mindfulness of our automatic reactions. We train ourselves to notice when the mind quickly labels an experience as good or bad, desirable or undesirable. By creating space around these immediate reactions, we develop the farmer's ability to meet life with an open, we'll see, rather than closed certainty. In practical terms, this approach doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. The farmer still took appropriate action at each stage, searching for his lost horse, helping his son heal, and adapting to changing circumstances. But he did so without the additional suffering that comes from premature judgment and emotional reactivity. The Buddha taught, as rain falls equally on the just and the unjust, don't burden your heart with judgments, but rain your kindness equally on all. This teaching extends the farmer's equanimity toward all experiences to our treatment of all beings. When we suspend our rush to judgment, we create space for compassion to arise naturally. Tonight, as you reflect on recent events in your life that you've categorized as fortunate or unfortunate, can you hold them with the farmer's we'll see perspective? Can you recognize that the full meaning and impact of these experiences are still unfolding? As the Buddha said, nothing is permanent. Everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming. In this understanding lies the wisdom to meet life's continuous unfolding with equanimity and grace. Let's now explore a story about the nature of true wisdom. This is the cup of tea. A university professor renowned for his scholarly knowledge of philosophy and religion once visited a Zen master. The professor had studied Zen texts extensively and had written several academic papers on the subject. He was curious to meet a living master of the tradition, but he was also eager to demonstrate his own understanding. When he arrived at the master's simple dwelling, the elderly Zen master welcomed him warmly and invited him to sit. Before beginning their discussion, the master suggested they have tea. The professor nodded, expecting that after the customary tea, he would have the opportunity to engage in a deep, philosophical conversation. As the master prepared the tea with deliberate, mindful movements, the professor began expounding his understanding of Zen. He quoted various scriptures, analyzed different schools of thought, and compared Zen with other philosophical traditions. He spoke at length, demonstrating his extensive knowledge, while the master listened in silence. When the water was hot, the master placed a cup before the professor and began to pour the tea. The professor, still talking, paused briefly to acknowledge the tea and continued his discourse. The master poured until the cup was full, but then continued pouring. Tea spilled over the rim, across the table, and into the professor's lap. "Stop," cried the professor, jumping up. "The cup is already full. No more will go in." The Zen master stopped pouring and looked directly at the professor. "Like this cup," he said, "you're full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor was stunned into silence. In that moment, he realized that all his knowledge, times about times, Zen had become a barrier to understanding Zen times itself asterisk. His cup was so full of concepts, theories, and secondhand information that there was no room for direct experience or fresh insight. Humbled, the professor bowed to the master. "I see now that I know nothing of Zen," he said. "Please teach me as if I were a beginner." The master smiled. "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Let's start with an empty cup." From that day forward, the professor approached his studies differently. Rather than accumulating more knowledge to fill his, here's the rewritten and localized version of your text. Even with his cup already brimming, he made a point of emptying it. He deliberately set aside his preconceived notions, pet theories, and intellectual comprehension, all to make room for a more immediate experience and real wisdom. The Buddha put it this way: in the beginner's mind, there are endless possibilities, but the expert's mind is limited. This teaching really gets at the heart of true wisdom, which seems kind of backwards. To truly know something, you often have to ditch what you times think, times you know, to make room for what's actually real. The professor's shift from being full to being empty, from just knowing stuff in his head to being truly open and aware, that's what this is all about. But why do we so often mix up just knowing facts with actually being wise? Zen Buddhism points out some common ways we get this wrong. For starters, our whole culture tells us that being smart and knowing a lot is the best thing. From the time we start school, we're taught to cram in facts, learn theories, and understand concepts. And we often do that instead of learning to trust our gut, our senses, or just what we experience firsthand. Then there's our ego, which loves to be right. Having strong opinions and a ton of knowledge can become a big part of who we think we are. It's how we feel important and like we belong. So admitting we don't know something or emptying that cup of knowledge can feel like a threat to our very identity. It makes us resist being vulnerable, which is exactly what we need to learn. And finally, we just don't like emptiness itself. Especially in Western cultures, we see emptiness as a bad thing, something that needs to be filled up. But in Zen, emptiness, or times, sunyata times, is actually seen as potential, a blank slate full of possibilities. It's like that empty cup ready for some fresh tea. The Japanese even have a word for it, times, mushin times, which means no mind. It's a state of being ready and open that comes from letting go of fixed ideas and assumptions. It doesn't mean being mindless, just holding your thoughts lightly without getting too attached. That way you make room for inspiration and insights to just bubble up from the emptiness. Zen practices help us develop this empty cup feeling in different ways. Meditation helps us notice when we're getting caught up in our own thoughts and gently bring ourselves back to the present. Beginner's mind, or time shoshin times, encourages us to approach everything with fresh eyes like we're seeing it for the first time. And the tradition's emphasis on passing on wisdom directly beyond just words reminds us that true understanding can't be limited to just what we know in our heads. The Buddha said to know and not to act is not yet to know. This really highlights the difference between knowing something in theory and truly understanding it. True knowing changes how you live, not just how you think. If knowledge doesn't affect your actions and who you are, it's just information. It's like tea that never even makes it into the cup. So in your own journey of learning, pay attention to when your cup might be too full to take in anything new. Maybe you go into a conversation already sure of what the other person is going to say. Or you read a book and filter everything through your own beliefs. Or you face a challenge and assume you already know how it works based on what you've experienced before. Those full cup moments keep you from having new insights and growing as a person. Tonight, as you're just resting and being aware, try emptying your cup. Let go of what you think you know about relaxing about yourself, about these teachings. Make room for a direct experience to show itself beyond your ideas and expectations. Like the Buddha taught, if you empty your boat of water, it will go lightly and swiftly. In the same way, when we clear our minds of fixed ideas and assumptions, we move through life with more ease, openness, and wisdom. Now let's switch gears and tell a story about perspective and how easy it is to judge others. It's called "This is the Gate of Paradise." Once upon a time, there was a samurai warrior known far and wide for his incredible skill and his unwavering commitment to the samurai code of honor. He'd served his lord loyally for years, fought in many battles, and earned great fame. But as time went on, the samurai started to grapple with bigger questions about life, death, and what it all meant. He'd heard about a wise Zen master living in a temple way up in the mountains, so he decided to make the trip and seek some answers. After many days of tough travel, he finally made it to the temple gate. The master, an old monk who was small and plain, came out to greet him. The samurai bowed a little and introduced himself proudly, listing all his accomplishments and titles. Then he got right to it. "Master, I've come to ask about heaven and hell. Can you tell me about these places?" The Zen master looked up at the imposing warrior and suddenly burst out laughing, a mocking, derisive sound. "You call yourself a samurai," he sneered. "Look at you. You're nothing but a puffed-up fool in a costume. What lord would want someone like you guarding him? You'd better run along and stop wasting my time with your silly questions." The samurai's face went red with rage. His pride was deeply wounded. He grabbed his sword, drawing it with lightning speed, and raised it high above his head, ready to strike down the insulting monk. At that exact moment, with the blade still in the air, the master calmly looked into the warrior's eyes and said softly, "That is the gate of hell." The samurai froze. In a flash, he understood what the master had done. Deliberately provoked him to show how quickly pride, anger, and violence could rise up, creating a personal hell right there in his own mind. Humbled by this realization, the samurai slowly lowered his sword and put it back in its sheath, bowing deeply to the master in gratitude for the powerful lesson. As he straightened up, the master looked at him with gentle eyes and said, "And that is the gate of paradise." In that instant, the samurai understood that heaven and hell weren't faraway places you went to after you died. They were states of mind created in each moment by his own choices, reactions, and awareness. The Buddha taught what we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Our life is the creation of our mind. This teaching really brings home the samurai's experience that suffering and freedom come from within, based on how we react to things, rather than being forced on us from the outside. So why are we so quick to create our own personal hells? Zen Buddhism points out some common patterns that lead us down that road. First, there's our reactivity, that almost automatic way we respond to things that trigger us using the same old emotions and behaviors. The samurai's quick switch from pride to rage is a perfect example. It shows how easily a perceived insult can cause intense suffering. Then there's our obsession with our self-image, how attached we are to how we see ourselves and how we think others should see us. The samurai's idea of himself as an honorable, respected warrior made him vulnerable to the master's taunts. When that image was threatened, hell appeared instantly in the form of violent rage. And finally, there's our lack of awareness, how we lose touch with our observing consciousness when we get overwhelmed by strong emotions. In his anger, the samurai forgot his deeper questions and spiritual goals, becoming completely consumed by his reactive self. The Japanese have a concept called times fudo's shin times, which means immovable mind. It describes a state of balance that stays steady no matter what happens around you. It's not about suppressing emotions, but about having a centered awareness that allows emotions to come and go without taking over. The samurai glimpsed this quality when he lowered his sword, stepping back from being reactive and making a conscious choice. Zen practice helps us cultivate this awareness in several ways. Meditation trains us to watch our reactions as they arise without immediately acting on them. Mindfulness in everyday life helps us notice our triggers and patterns as they appear. And teachings on non-self encourage us to hold our identities lightly, which reduces the reactivity that comes from a threatened ego. The Buddha said, "You will not be punished times for times your anger. You will be punished times by times your anger." This really drives home the idea that our suffering is self-made. The hells we experience aren't punishments for our reactions, but the direct result of those reactions themselves. In the same way, our moments of paradise aren't rewards, but the natural result of awareness, compassion, and being present. So, in your own life, pay attention to those gates of hell and paradise as they show up in everyday moments. Maybe you get annoyed when someone's driving too slow, creating a little hell of frustration and anger. Or maybe you respond with patience and understanding when a kid makes a mistake, opening a gate to paradise through your compassion. These little choices add up to create the overall mood of your mind. Tonight, as you're drifting off to sleep, notice if your mind starts creating any personal hells, with worries, plans, or rehashing the day's frustrations. Can you recognize these as self-made states, not just the way things are? Can you gently lower your sword, like the samurai did, and choose awareness over reactivity? Like the Buddha taught, holding on to anger is like grabbing a hot coal, intending to throw it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. By letting go of that coal, by choosing the gate of paradise over the gate of hell, we discover that freedom is always there, just one conscious choice away. Let's dive into a story about finding wisdom through direct experience instead of always looking for it outside ourselves. This one's called Ryoan's Moon. A long time ago in Japan, there was a Zen monk named Ryoan, known for his simple life and deep wisdom. He lived alone in a small hut on the side of a mountain with very few belongings and no fancy things. But even though he seemed poor, he always had a look of contentment and joy that made wealthier people jealous. One night, a thief broke into Ryoan's hut only to find there was nothing worth stealing. Ryoan was meditating in the corner and heard the guy rummaging through his few things. Knowing what was going on, Ryoan spoke calmly without even turning around. "You've come a long way to visit me," he said, "and you shouldn't leave empty-handed. Please take my clothes as a gift." The thief was shocked by this unexpected response, but he grabbed the monk's worn-out robe and quickly ran out of the hut, confused by the whole thing. Ryoan sat there naked, watching through the window as the thief disappeared into the night. Looking up at the full moon lighting up the landscape, he sighed and said softly, "Poor fellow, I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." This simple story shows a profound truth about what real wealth is and where true happiness comes from. The thief was looking for material things, but Rioan had found something much more valuable: the ability to appreciate the beauty of the moon, the richness of the present moment, and the freedom that comes from not being attached to possessions. The Buddha taught, "Let us rise up and be thankful for. If we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we got sick, at least we didn't die. So let us all be thankful." This teaching reflects Rioan's outlook, finding happiness not in getting things but in appreciating what's already there. So why do we keep looking for happiness in the wrong places? Zen Buddhism points out some things that lead us astray in our search for fulfillment. First, we're taught to always want more, to believe that having more stuff, experiences, status, or accomplishments will make us happy. This idea, which is pushed on us by our consumer culture, keeps us always looking outside ourselves instead of finding the richness that's already within. Then, we don't know the difference between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure comes from getting what we want, but it's always temporary and often makes us want even more. True happiness, on the other hand, comes from how we relate to what we already have, our ability to appreciate things, get involved, and find meaning no matter what's going on around us. And finally, we miss the everyday miracles, the ordinary wonders. Like the thief who couldn't see the beauty of the moon, we often miss the amazing things that are freely available in every moment. The miracle of breathing, the beauty of nature, the warmth of human connection, the ability to be aware itself. Blinded by what we think we're missing, we don't see the abundance that's all around us. The Japanese concept of times, wabi-sabi, times, embodies Rioan's perspective, finding beauty in simplicity, imperfection, and natural processes instead of luxury, flawlessness, or permanence. This way of seeing things values what's weathered, authentic, and humble over what's polished, impressive, or extravagant. Rioan's simple hut, though lacking material treasures, was rich in times, wabi-sabi, times, the deep beauty that only reveals itself to a mind that's open and appreciative. Zen practice helps us develop this ability to appreciate things through mindfulness of everyday experiences. Things like mindful walking, eating, or listening train us to fully take in the richness of simple moments. Meditation helps us see how our constant reaching for something else keeps us from experiencing what's already here. And the tradition's focus on simplicity makes room for deeper appreciation instead of always wanting more. The Buddha said, "Health is the greatest gift. Contentment is the greatest wealth. Faithfulness is the best relationship." This teaching points to where true well-being comes from, not things we own, but qualities of mind and heart. Rioan understood this, finding wealth, not in material goods, but in his appreciation of the moon, his generous spirit, and his freedom from attachment. So in your own life, notice when you fall into the thief's pattern of missing the free treasures while looking for something else. Maybe you scroll through social media feeling dissatisfied while missing the beauty of the moment. Or you focus on what's missing in a relationship instead of appreciating what's being offered. Or you put off happiness until you achieve something in the future, missing opportunities for joy right now. Tonight, as you're resting and being aware, can you adopt Rioan's perspective? Can you see the moon in your own life? The beauty, wonder, and richness that don't need to be acquired because they're already here. As the Buddha taught, the way is not in the sky. The way is in the heart. The contentment we seek isn't found in what we can get, but in our ability to appreciate what's freely given in each moment. Now let's look at a story about finding our true path. It's called Choosing the Right Boat. A young seeker once traveled to a monastery by a river known for its wise Zen masters. He had studied lots of spiritual traditions and practices, but he was confused about which path to take. Every teaching seemed to contradict the others, and the variety of methods made it hard to make a decision. When he got to the monastery, an old master greeted him and listened patiently to his problem. "Master," the young man said, "I've studied yoga, practiced different kinds of meditation, read the sutras, explored rituals and ceremonies, and even looked into esoteric practices. Each tradition claims to be the true path to enlightenment, but they all point in different directions. How can I know which path is right for me? How can I be sure I'm not wasting my time or following a false teaching?" The master smiled and led the young man down to the riverbank. There were several boats tied up there: fishing boats, transport vessels, small rowboats, and fancy crafts with sails. "Tell me," the master said, pointing to the boats, "which of these is the right boat?" The seeker looked confused. "The right boat for times what times, master?" "Exactly," the master nodded. "Without knowing your destination, how can you choose the right vessel? Some boats are for fishing, others for carrying cargo, others for speed, and others for shallow waters. None of them is inherently right or wrong. Each has its purpose." The master kept going. "It's the same with spiritual practices. The question isn't which path is right for everyone, but which one serves your time's particular journey. Where are you trying to go? What problems do you face? What's your personality like? The answers to those questions will help you choose your vessel." But the seeker protested. "Surely some spiritual paths are better than others. Some must lead to greater truth." "Let me ask you this," the master replied. "Is a fishing boat better than a passenger ferry? Or is a sailboat better than a rowboat? Each serves its purpose based on the situation and the needs." The master picked up a small stone and threw it into the river. "All these boats share one essential purpose: to cross the water without sinking. In the same way, all genuine spiritual paths, even with their different methods and focuses, share a common goal: to free us from suffering and illusion, to awaken us to our true nature. The outer forms might be very different, but the inner essence is the same." "So how do I choose?" the young man asked. "By knowing yourself," the master answered. "See which teachings resonate deeply with you, which practices have a positive effect on your life, which traditions feel like coming home. Trust what you experience directly over abstract arguments. And remember that the boat isn't the destination. It's a way to get you across. Once you reach the other shore, you won't need to carry the boat on your back." The seeker was quiet for a while, thinking about what he'd heard. Finally, he bowed to the master, understanding that he wasn't looking for the universally right path, but for the path that would serve his particular journey across the waters of life. The Buddha taught, "I teach one thing, and one thing only: suffering and the end of suffering." This teaching points to the practical heart of spiritual practice, its effectiveness in freeing us from unnecessary pain and waking us up to greater freedom and compassion. Like the boats in the story, different practices might take different approaches, but their ultimate purpose is the same. So why do we get so confused and conflicted about spiritual paths? Zen Buddhism points out some things that contribute to this common problem. First, we tend to think in terms of opposites, sorting complex realities into simple categories of right, wrong, true, false, better, or worse. This either-or way of thinking doesn't appreciate the variety of effective ways to awaken. Then, we focus on the form over the function, getting caught up in the outer methods, beliefs, or traditions instead of their practical effect on our lives. We might argue fiercely about minor points of doctrine while ignoring whether a practice actually reduces our suffering and increases our wisdom and compassion. And finally, we want certainty, absolute guarantees before we commit to a path. This search for perfect certainty can keep us from fully engaging with any practice long enough to see its potential for change. The Japanese concepts of times Jiriki times and times Tariki times self-power and other power represent two very different approaches to spiritual practice. One focuses on personal effort and discipline, the other surrenders to a power beyond the individual self. Instead of seeing these as contradictory, Zen wisdom recognizes that different people and situations might call for different approaches or even a balance of both. Zen practice itself embodies this practical spirit through its focus on direct experience rather than doctrine. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him is a famous Zen saying that warns against being attached to any fixed idea or authority, even the Buddha himself. True Dharma isn't found in loyalty to external teachings, but in the direct realization of our own Buddha nature. The Buddha said, "Believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and common sense." This teaching encourages us to test spiritual claims against our own direct experience, rather than just accepting them because someone in authority said so. Like choosing the right boat for our journey, selecting spiritual practices means figuring out what actually serves our particular needs and situation in your own spiritual or personal growth journey. Notice if you've been caught in a confusion similar to the young seeker. Maybe you felt overwhelmed by conflicting spiritual teachings or personal growth methods. Or you've worried about finding the one true path among many options. Or you've been reluctant to commit to a practice for fear of choosing the wrong one. Tonight, as you rest in awareness, can you connect with the wisdom of the boat metaphor? Can you sense which practices, teachings, or approaches have actually helped you cross the waters of confusion toward greater clarity and peace? As the Day EGS, Buddha taught, the whole path of mindfulness is this. Whatever you are doing, be aware of it. This simple instruction reminds us that the most important quality of any spiritual approach is its ability to awaken us to the present moment, the only place where genuine transformation can happen. Let's explore a story about the nature of true understanding. This one's called The Sound of One Hand. Hakuin was a famous Zen master who lived in Japan during the Edo period. He was known for his tough teaching style and for bringing new life to Zen practice by focusing on direct experience instead of just intellectual understanding. Of the many times koans times paradoxical questions or statements used in Zen training, Hakuin's most famous was surprisingly simple. What is the sound of one hand? One day, a serious young monk came to study with Hakuin. After some initial training, Hakuin gave him this time's koan asterisk. You must discover the sound of one hand, the master instructed. Until you do, you will understand nothing of Zen. The monk bowed and went off to meditate on this puzzling question. After a few days, he went back to Hakuin's room for times a private interview. Master, he said, I think I have the answer. The sound of one hand is the sound of water flowing in a stream. Hakuin shook his head. No, keep working. The monk went back to his meditation. A week later, he came back. Master, I have it now. The sound of one hand is the sound of wind moving through pine needles. No, Hakuin replied, that's still the sound of something. Go deeper. Again and again, the monk came back with different answers. The cry of a bird, the rustling of leaves, the distant temple bell. Each time, Hakuin rejected his answer and sent him back to keep searching. After months of intense practice, the monk's understanding began to change. He stopped trying to find a clever answer and instead let the question sink in beyond his thinking mind. One morning, as he was sitting in meditation, something broke open inside him. He rushed to Hakuin's room. When Hakuin asked, "What is the sound of one hand?" the monk didn't respond with words, but with presence, a direct, immediate demonstration that went beyond intellectual understanding. Hakuin smiled and nodded, recognizing that the monk had finally moved beyond seeking answers to experiencing the question itself as a gateway to direct realization. The Buddha taught the finger, pointing to the moon, is not the moon. This teaching highlights the difference between intellectual understanding, which points towards the truth, and direct realization, which is the truth itself. The monk's journey from intellectual answers to immediate experience shows this fundamental shift. So why do we keep mistaking concepts for reality? Zen Buddhism points out some patterns that keep us trapped in intellectual understanding instead of direct experience. First, there's our education, which trains us to believe that understanding comes mainly through thinking, analyzing, and putting things into words. This creates a bias towards intellectual comprehension at the expense of other ways of knowing. Then we don't like not knowing, and our minds resist staying in a state of uncertainty or openness. When faced with a question like, "What is the sound of one hand?" our first urge is to come up with an answer, any answer, instead of staying in the fertile space of the question itself. And finally, we separate knowing from being, treating understanding as something we possess rather than something we embody. This truth. True Zen realization isn't about simply grasping the right concept. It's about becoming the understanding itself, achieving it through direct personal experience. The Japanese term mu, which literally means nothing or non-being, is frequently employed in Zen practice to cut through the clutter of conceptual thinking. Famously, when a monk inquired of Master Joshu whether a dog possesses Buddha nature, Joshu responded with a simple mu. This wasn't a negative reply, but rather a deliberate rejection of the question's underlying framework. This particular use of mu perfectly illustrates Zen's approach to transcending the limitations of dualistic thought through direct pointing. Zen koans, like the sound of one hand clapping, aren't philosophical puzzles intended to be solved intellectually. Instead, they serve as devices for exhausting the conceptual mind, thereby opening a pathway to direct experience. These koans deliberately challenge our logical thinking patterns, creating conditions where intellectual understanding must inevitably yield to a different, more profound mode of knowing. The Buddha wisely stated, "As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not shaken by praise or blame." This inner steadiness isn't derived from conceptual understanding alone, but from direct realization. A knowing that is so complete, it transforms the very person who knows. While concepts can be easily challenged and overturned by counter-arguments, direct experience possesses a solidity that transcends the realm of logical debate. In your own life, begin to notice the subtle yet significant difference between mere conceptual knowledge and truly embodied understanding. For instance, you might intellectually know that life is impermanent. However, this knowledge often remains abstract and distant until you personally experience the death of someone close to you. Similarly, you might understand the concept of mindfulness in theory, but this understanding differs fundamentally from the direct, visceral experience of present moment awareness. Tonight, as you settle into a state of restful awareness, can you allow yourself to move beyond mere concepts about relaxation or sleep and dive into direct experience itself? Can you release your grip on what you think should be happening and simply be present with what actually is happening? As the Buddha wisely taught, don't just do something, sit there. This instruction, which directly reverses our usual impulse toward constant activity, invites us to enter the realm of direct experience that lies beyond the reach of our busy conceptualizing minds. Let us now turn to our final story, one that beautifully illuminates the path beyond ceaseless seeking. This is the tale of the sacred mountain. In ancient China, there lived a young scholar named Li, who had dedicated countless years to the intensive study of spiritual texts from a wide variety of traditions. He had diligently read numerous sutras, meticulously memorized sacred verses, and engaged in spirited debates with learned masters. Despite his extensive and impressive knowledge, he felt that something absolutely essential was still missing: a direct personal experience of the profound truth that these teachings were meant to convey. Having heard that a great Zen master lived as a hermit on a remote and sacred mountain, Li made the determined decision to undertake the arduous journey to seek the master's guidance. After many long days of difficult travel through dense forests and up steep, treacherous slopes, he finally arrived at the simple hut where the master resided. The old master welcomed him warmly and immediately invited him to rest from his long and tiring journey. After they had shared a simple, humble meal together, Li explained the purpose of his visit. "Master," he began, "I have studied spiritual teachings extensively. I know the doctrines and philosophies, but I feel that I'm still missing the very essence. Therefore, I have come to ask you, what is the ultimate truth? What is the final goal of all spiritual seeking? What in essence is enlightenment?" The master looked at him with kind, compassionate eyes and simply said, "Before I answer, would you care for some tea?" Li nodded in agreement, and the master rose to prepare it. While the water was heating, the master gently inquired, "Tell me, what did you notice as you climbed the mountain to reach my hut?" Li paused thoughtfully for a moment. "Well," he began, "the path was undeniably steep and quite difficult. There were numerous rocks and exposed roots that made climbing quite challenging. At times, I had to stop and rest simply to catch my breath." "And did you happen to notice anything else along the way?" the master asked, his eyes twinkling with gentle amusement. "There were beautiful pine trees and vibrant, colorful wildflowers growing along the path," Li added. "At one point, I crossed a clear stream with incredibly pure water, and occasionally there were gaps in the trees that revealed breathtaking views of the valleys far below." "I see," the master said softly as he poured the tea. "And now that you've arrived here, what do you expect to find?" Li hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. "I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. Perhaps some profound teaching or experience that will finally make everything clear. The ultimate truth that all the texts point toward but never quite fully reveal." The master then handed Li a cup of tea and sat down beside him at the entrance to the hut. From this advantageous vantage point, they could both see the magnificent landscape spread out before them, mountains rising majestically in the distance, clouds drifting lazily across the vast sky, and birds soaring gracefully on thermal currents. After they had both sipped their tea in comfortable silence for some time, the master finally spoke. "The ultimate truth you seek," he said gently, "was present in every single step of your journey, in the effort of your climbing, in the beauty you observed, and even in the challenges you faced. It is also here now, in this very cup of tea, in the mountains spread out before us, and in the very space of awareness in which all of these experiences arise." He continued, "There is truly nothing to attain beyond what is already present within you. Enlightenment is not some special state that's separate from your ordinary everyday experience. It is rather seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary, recognizing the inherent sacred nature of each and every moment." The master then gestured towards the panoramic view before them. "This mountain you call sacred is really no more sacred than the ground where your own home stands. These trees are no more special than those that are already growing in your own village. And this very moment is no different in its essential nature from every other moment of your entire life. Li looked genuinely confused by the master's words. Then why did I need to make this difficult journey? Why do we study and practice spiritual disciplines at all? The master smiled knowingly. The journey was necessary not because the truth was hidden on this mountain, but rather because you believed that it was. Sometimes we must completely exhaust our searching before we can finally recognize what has always been right here with us, never truly absent. The spiritual path is not really about finding something that is missing. It's about clearly seeing what is already here. As they continued to sit together in the quiet, peaceful beauty of the mountain evening, Li began to understand that the truth he had been so diligently seeking was not hidden away in esoteric teachings or special experiences, but rather in the direct, unfiltered encounter with life itself, just as it is in all of its ordinary yet magnificent marvel. The Buddha taught if we could only see the miracle of a single flower clearly, our whole life would change. This powerful teaching points to the radical shift in perception that occurs when we stop habitually overlooking the ordinary and instead recognize the profound nature of what is already present. Li's challenging journey up the sacred mountain represents our common underlying belief that truth is always located elsewhere, requiring special circumstances or experiences in order to access. Why do we so persistently believe that what we are truly seeking is always somewhere else, just out of reach? Zen Buddhism identifies several common patterns that often serve to maintain this pervasive illusion. The first is our common tendency toward idealization. Our habitual creation of perfect mental images of enlightenment, peace, or fulfillment, which we then compare unfavorably with our actual present experience. This constant comparison inevitably guarantees dissatisfaction with what is already here right now. Second, there's what Buddhists often refer to as spiritual bypassing, which involves using spiritual ideas or practices as a way to avoid direct engagement with the messy, challenging aspects of ordinary everyday life. By conveniently placing truth on some distant mountain, we effectively create a convenient excuse for not finding it in our own immediate circumstances. Third, there's our culturally reinforced habit of constant postponement. The unwavering belief that true fulfillment is always in the future, just after we achieve something, acquire something, or become something more. This deeply ingrained habit prevents us from recognizing the fundamental completeness that is already available to us in the present moment. The Japanese concept of shikantaza, simply sitting, embodies the very spirit of the master's profound teaching. This particular practice involves sitting without any specific goal or object of focus, neither actively seeking special experiences nor rejecting ordinary ones. It represents a radical affirmation that this present moment, exactly as it is, already contains everything needed for awakening. Zen Master Dogen wrote, "If you cannot find the truth right where you are, where else do you realistically expect to find it?" This profound teaching directly challenges our ingrained assumption that truth, peace, or enlightenment exists somewhere other than here, in a time other than now, or in an experience other than this. Like Li diligently climbing the sacred mountain, we often exhaust ourselves seeking elsewhere what has never truly been absent from us. The Buddha wisely said, "It is in the very nature of things that joy naturally arises in a person who is free from remorse." This insightful teaching points to the natural emergence of well-being when we finally stop creating a division between where we actually are and where we think we should be. The complete cessation of incessant seeking doesn't leave behind emptiness. Rather, it reveals the inherent fullness that the constant seeking had previously obscured. In your own life, pay close attention and notice when you find yourself falling into the common pattern of believing that what you truly seek is always elsewhere. Perhaps you believe that peace will finally come after you resolve a particular problem, or that genuine connection will only be felt with different people, or that life will finally be complete only when certain specific conditions are met. Each of these deeply held beliefs subtly creates a sense of rejection of the present moment, causing you to inadvertently overlook the sacred mountain where you already stand. Tonight, as we thoughtfully complete our journey through these inspiring stories, can you fully recognize that the peace you are seeking through listening is not separate from your current awareness? Can you truly feel how the inherent wisdom contained within these timeless tales is not distant, but immediately available within your direct experience? As the Buddha wisely taught, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. The ultimate truth is not hidden away on some distant sacred mountain or buried within ancient texts. It is found in the profound miracle of ordinary awareness, the silent witness that has been present throughout our entire journey together. As we thoughtfully draw our time together to a close, let us reflect, even if just for a brief moment, on the incredible journey we've taken through these ancient stories of wisdom. Each individual tale has thoughtfully offered a unique facet of understanding, yet they all ultimately point to the same fundamental essential truth that peace, clarity, and profound awakening are indeed available to us here and now, not in some distant far-off future or under some rare special circumstance. The story of the empty boat taught us to be aware of when we're unintentionally filling situations with our own assumed intentions. The tale of the monk and the tiger beautifully showed us how to find genuine joy in the present moment, despite the inevitable challenges that life throws our way. The lesson of the two arrows revealed how we can mindfully avoid adding unnecessary suffering to the inevitable pain that life brings. The story of the mustard seed helped us to compassionately understand the universal nature of loss and the inherent impermanence of all things. The tale of the farmer and the horse vividly demonstrated the profound wisdom of suspending judgment about life's constantly changing circumstances. We thoughtfully learned from the story of the Buddha and the angry man that we always have the power to choose whether or not to accept the negativity that others may offer us. The story of the monk with the teacup beautifully showed us how embracing impermanence allows for a deeper and more profound appreciation of life. The tale of the Buddha and the robe thoughtfully taught us about the true meaning of generosity. The story of the two monks and the river reminded us not to needlessly carry burdens long after their usefulness has completely passed. The tale of the cricket in the temple helped us to more fully value the power of inner silence, which allows us to more clearly hear the subtle whispers of wisdom. The story of the king and the laughing man revealed that true contentment ultimately comes from fully receiving the present moment, rather than from ceaselessly acquiring more. The tale of the Zen master and the thief beautifully showed us the transformative power of giving. The story of the master archer demonstrated how undivided attention ultimately leads to mastery. The lesson of the heavy stone taught us to find creative solutions by courageously questioning our own assumptions. The story of the empty cup reminded us to approach life with a spirit of receptivity, rather than being weighed down by preconceptions. The tale of the farmer's wise response beautifully showed us the wisdom of equanimity amidst life's inevitable changes. The story of the Zen master's tea thoughtfully demonstrated that true understanding requires emptying our own cup of preconceived opinions. The story of the samurai at the gate thoughtfully helped us recognize how heaven and hell are ultimately created within our own minds. The tale of Ryoan and the moon beautifully reminded us that the greatest treasures are already freely available to us provided we have eyes to truly see them. The story of the right boat taught us to thoughtfully choose practices that best serve our own unique journey. The lesson of the sound of one hand clearly revealed the critical difference between mere intellectual understanding and genuine direct realization. And finally, the tale of the sacred mountain beautifully showed us that what we so diligently seek through spiritual practice is never truly absent from our own ordinary everyday experience. The Buddha wisely taught that these three things cannot ultimately remain hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. As you thoughtfully continue on your own unique path, may the truths that were thoughtfully illuminated in these stories remain with you, not merely as concepts to remember, but rather as powerful invitations to experience your own life with greater presence, compassion, and enduring wisdom. Thank you very much for sharing this journey with us from Voice of Zen. May you rest peacefully tonight, waking refreshed and joyfully carrying these ancient and timeless teachings into the bright light of a brand new day.